Hey guys, I'm Urizi. This story is all about what if Naruto was assigned to Asuma and Team 10. Mizuki never got to shoot his mouth off at Naruto the night he took the Scroll of Seals. Other than skipping a half-manic monologue from him, what exactly did this change for everyone's favorite blonde ninja? Who knows? Before we proceed with the story, please like and subscribe to this channel if you liked the video, and don't forget to check the description for the other works of the author if you liked the story. Let's start. Chapter 40, FLBSLB. I thought I hated Shino's bugs more than any others. Naruto shouted as he, Shikamaru, Ino, and Fu ran away from a swarm of larger than normal bees that were doggedly pursuing them through the trees. Why is this happening? I thought I hated my bug more than any other. Fu responded in kind, turning her head to see that they were still just out of range of reaching them and possibly stinging them. She didn't want to stop and find out if they could pierce her Tekiyaseitai, adaptable body, as she had been dealing with too many surprises when it came to her natural defense after going to the Chunin exams. What are we going to do about this? Those bees weren't natural, they couldn't be. For an attack like that there had to be a hive. For there to be a hive there would have been way more bees, and these bees were bigger than even bumblebees but looked like hornets. They weren't swarming, and they seemed organized, like they had been given orders. Yeah, because before that they were surrounding them, just looking at them and waiting on them to make a move. Normal bees did not act that way. These are summon creatures. Shikamaru exclaimed, turning his head for a moment to glare back at the bees as they ran. They have a ninja giving them orders. It's the only way this whole thing can keep being coordinated in real time. But where? And how are we going to get to who it is even if? He then stopped and took a glance at his two teammates. Ino, I need you to use your new jutsu, and Naruto, use your echolocation jutsu to nail this guy. What? Both blondes said before sparing each other a glance, Ino glaring at Naruto and Naruto turning his eyes away from her, wishing that someone that close to him wouldn't look at him the way others used to. Hurry up before we get stung by the stupid things already. Fu shouted authoritatively at them. Fine. Reluctantly, Ino hopped onto Naruto's back and wrapped her arms around his neck and her legs around his waist to make sure her body would be secure. Don't you drop me or I swear to Kami I'll dash dot. I won't, I promise. What was with that? Ino had done this a million times with him, and Naruto had never dropped her or let her get hurt while she wasn't in her body. He took that very seriously. He didn't want to think about Ino mistrusting or hating him that much, and simply put his mind to locating the summoner of the hornet swarm. Ping. He didn't feel just trees blocking his signal, nor did he merely sense the hornets, he sensed a person's body. Ino-chan, 7 o'clock, behind us. Naruto whispered to her, speeding up to make sure the added weight of Ino didn't slow him down and get them caught. She turned around but couldn't see any person, just the bees and the trees that were there the whole time. I can't see anyone. Are you sure? Ino already had her hand seals halfway formed and didn't want to leave her body just for mere speculation. So now she didn't trust his senses when he used his jutsu? Naruto grit his teeth, but let his hands go from Ino's thighs to form a quick Kage-bunshin that ran with them a short ways before sharply turning around. Follow the clone then, he knows where. Ino nodded and finished her jutsu, Shinjo-Aishin no Jutsu, mind-body projection jutsu. Ino's spirit jumped out of her body in visible specter form, and she followed after Naruto's Kage-bunshin as it brazenly jumped through the wave of bees, pointing towards the unseeable person before being destroyed by the deadly stings. Ino followed the exact direction that the clone had been pointing in blindly, but smiled when she saw the leaves rustle, signifying him changing direction. Now all she had to do was chase him, and she could fly through the tree trunks in that form. But just as she started chasing, her spirit disappeared from the forest with a pop, returning instantly back to her body, which stirred with a gasp and a start. I saw him. I almost had him, but he bugged out and ran away when I started chasing after him. She said with a bit of regret as to her limited range when it came to her latest jutsu. It's okay, Ino-chan. Naruto said with a grin, at least we know that the bastard is running now. So let's stop him. Oh, so he was still being ever the sweetie in the hopes that she'd stop being mad at him. His dedication to having her forgive him was admirable, but it would take more than that to get Yamanaka Ino off of one's back. Speaking of getting off of someone's back, you can let me down now, I can run on my own. Naruto said, blushing slightly at realizing that he actually was still holding Ino on his back and his hands were placed rather high up under her thighs to keep her in place. Well, what about our combination? We can't really do it if we're not close. At hearing of a combination move and remembering what they had been working on, Ino's eyes widened and she hurriedly started making her hand seals. Ah, you're right. Okay, let's go. Dakujiri, Poison Mist. Naruto had already drawn his machete in mid-leap from branch to branch. He turned in the air and started swinging it by its chain like a fan blade. Suishinki Haritsu Bunkatsu Sen, Propeller Burst Splitter. Naruto's cyclone of wind that shot out from the windmill motion combined with the purple poison smog from Ino's mouth, blowing it directly onto the hornets. The many that avoided being cut down by the loose little blades of wind that came with the technique were killed by Ino's poison, dropping from the sky in droves and saving the fortunate from a painful demise. Not missing a beat once the hornets were disposed of, Shikamaru stopped on a branch and immediately began heading back the other way with Naruto, Ino still on his back, moving right along with him. Naruto, can you still find him? We can't let a ninja with a cloaking jutsu stay around here. If we can get close enough I can. Naruto said with a frown on his face as he kept releasing pulses of sonar to try and find the jerk that had sicked bees on them. The trees are in my way and I can't find things through solid objects. Follow me. Ino took the lead at that point to show them the direction that she had last come into contact with the enemy ninja. A bit behind them, Fu stood there on the branch that Shikamaru had turned around on, thinking to herself, I should just go back to Taki. It's not my mission to fight anyone, but can I really just leave them like that? She shook her head of the thought and then followed hurriedly to catch up with Team 10. I couldn't do something like that, could I? We are friends after all. Kurabaka was busy taking a tactical retreat away from those Konoha brats that somehow managed to find him. It seemed more like a guess at first, but it was a damn good guess. He didn't know what would have happened if that blonde girl's little ghost thing hit him, but from the way she was pursuing after him it was obvious he wouldn't have wanted to find out. A trio of punks had stopped his hornets, and how had they even seen him to begin with? And now they were following him. He could tell he was being tailed. All of this just to find a stupid entrance to this village. But it served a purpose. If it was well known how to reach to Kigakura, then it would have been destroyed by now, there was no doubt about it. Iwa would have crushed Taki first during the last war instead of getting dragged into the drawn-out war that had occurred with Konoha. In the middle of his thinking, he didn't seem to notice a pair of blonde boys drop down from the canopy above him with machetes drawn, almost until it was too late. Naruto and a clone fell from the sky, cutting right through Kurabaki in one pair of slashes before the man's body seemed to turn into beeswax. Damn clone. I fell for the decoy. At that moment, Shikamaru tackled Naruto and the clone to the ground before a dozen stingers could hit them. Ugh, thanks. No problem. Shikamaru said, helping Naruto and his clone up as the original kept searching around for the bastard again that had substituted himself with that fake. Do you have anything? He asked as Ino landed nearby them. Shikamaru then noticed Naruto grit his teeth. What's the matter? He's going back the way he had been coming before, for Fu this time. Who would be crazy enough to actually head back towards Fu? That did not seem like a smart course of action for any ninja to make, no matter who they were. Ino seemed ready for more dealing with pests, judging from the way she reached towards her supply pouch to grab a few poison smoke bombs. More stupid bees. True to her statement, there were bees hovering all around them. At the moment, Naruto felt like it was his fault due to the fact that he had thought he had felt the actual Kurabaki instead of just his clone. Otherwise the trap wouldn't have even happened. There was space being rented out in his head in regards to the whole situation with Ino. There had been all the way to Taki. But he had to set that aside or else they'd get killed. Get your damn head in the game already. Naruto screamed to himself mentally. You might feel bad about Ino-chan hating us for leaving, but you'll feel even worse if everyone gets killed because you can't focus. These bees. Shikamaru said slightly warily of what strategy would be used here. They've got explosive tags tied to their abdomens. Another pulse of his sonar jutsu to ensure that there were no nasty surprises waiting for them showed Naruto that there were two more enemies with different signatures from the man that they had chased to that point. Gritting his teeth angrily, Naruto pointed in the location close to the forest floor where he could feel two signatures. Ino didn't even need to hear him speak to know what he was alluding to and quickly hurled her poison-containing orb in that direction only for the bees that had been surrounding them to move away and form a wall to protect the two mystery ninja at the cost of their own lives, and at the cost of the explosive attack as the explosive tags burned down and exploded, rocking the quiet forest with a blast. "Stop using that stupid jutsu to hide!" Naruto shouted, taking advantage of the lack of bees to subvert him. Dropping down to the ground and rushing ahead with his machete, he drew back and swung at seemingly nothing but a shimmer in the air. "I can feel you there, you bastard!" Upon being discovered and attacked, instead of wasting chakra to keep up his cloaking jutsu, Hibachi, the blonde bee summoner, simply dropped the technique as he jumped away from Naruto's slash. "Oh. Kids like you shouldn't be so violent," he taunted until he found himself frozen in place. "What the dash? Good work, Naruto," Shikamaru said, holding the rat seal from his place on the forest floor, having used Kagemon no Jutsu while the imminent threat of Naruto was rampant. Instead of just moving his shadow around to try and flank the man, Shikamaru had his shadow hitch a ride with Naruto's shadow, getting a short jump and a shorter distance to risk being discovered from when it chose to make its approach on Hibachi. "Don't waste time finishing this guy. Find the other one before someone gets hurt. I'll finish this guy." With a nod, Naruto quickly broke off to locate the next enemy per Shikamaru's instructions, knowing that he had the situation handled. "Damn," Hibachi said, finding himself completely unable to move. "You think you've won, don't you, Naruto?" he asked, beginning to percolate his chakra for one surprise attack, the only move he could make with his body frozen as it was. "Nope," Shikamaru replied as a portion of shadow began to creep up Hibachi's body in the form of a hand that was moving for his neck. "I'm about to though." The hand of shadow clutched tightly around Hibachi's throat, making him feel as if his neck was in a powerful grip that was choking the life from him. "Kage Kubishibari no Jutsu, Shadow Neck Binding Jutsu, .. With a sharp crack, Hibachi's neck bent harshly to the side and what little outside of the panic that was left in his eyes left with the rest of the life in them. Shikamaru sighed and let his shadow retract before turning to locate Naruto and slash or Ino. "I never get used to that." With Naruto and Ino fighting his way back through the multitudes of bees proved to be more difficult than Naruto figured it would be to catch back up with the large bearded bee user and the third person that he had sensed with the one Shikamaru had dealt with. It was absurdly so though. Naruto had to run in the middle of a living shield comprised of more than a dozen shadow clones, all jumping through the forest making sure that the original Naruto in the middle of them did not get stung by the countless bees pursuing and moving around them angrily. The fact that these bees shot their stingers made the entire pursuit more miserable than before. Clones that had good aim with their machetes and were able to cut hornets before they got close enough to directly sting them were then covered in thick honey resulting from the bees' destruction, thus making them sitting ducks for the stingers that they had been trying to avoid. Naruto almost tripped on a branch upon hearing Ino's voice in his mind as clear as day. "Ino." He couldn't see her though. "It's Yamanaka clan telepathy, heh. Daddy finally started teaching me a jutsu instead of me teaching myself. Cool huh?" Despite what she said, she didn't sound that fine at all. "Look, I just wanted to say that I'm still mad at you and Shika, but you don't owe me anything. This year has been awesome and I guess teams can't stick together once they start heading up the ladder. Thanks for always being sweet." The first time Ino decided to try using this new jutsu of hers and she was using it to apologize. Apparently the link wasn't two ways since she couldn't hear his own thoughts even when he tried to project them, nor could she somehow hear him try to speak. "Ino. What are you talking about? Now isn't really the time to say anything like this, you know. Couldn't it wait until after the mission was over, or at least until they had beaten these bee-using chumps?" The only reason he could think of as to why she would say such a thing was in case she figured that she wouldn't be getting another chance to do so, perhaps because of her own impending demise. "No!" Naruto yelled, sending out pulse after pulse of sonar jutsu as his eyes started to turn red and his whisker marks began to deepen on his face. He pulled his goggles down over his eyes as his speed began to increase past what the swarms of bees were able to keep pace with as he tried to head back to find his wayward female teammate. This definitely wasn't going to be the way it ended after everything that had happened. Still just a baby that can't do or save anything on his own. The dark voice inside of his mind chuckled, further fueling Naruto's growing rage. "Now then, who do you want to kill?" With Ino. Ino's eyes were half-lidded as she sat stuck to the ground by a tree covered in the honey from many destroyed bees as many more of them flew all over the area. In her mouth she had several visible senbon needles, one of which she spat directly at the easiest to target bee, getting it to explode in honey. She had fought off as many as she could on her own until she ran out of poison smoke bombs to take them down with like pesticide, and then it had been hand-to-hand in targeting which became her downfall. Stupid suicide trap bees. She thought to herself as 3 stingers were fired at her and hit her, going along with the ones she already had in her. Ino let out a grunt of pain but spat 2 more needles and took out some more bees accurately. Her breathing began to labor and eventually she lost the strength to hold the needles in her mouth any longer as they fell to the ground, effectively taking the only weapon she had left at her immediate disposal from her. She couldn't pull her arms off of the ground due to the honey and the bee stings were working her over. Wow. You should be dead by now. Ino's half-closed eyes panned up to see a woman in a specialized kimono with a very short skirt, and neck-length brown hair. Without even letting any time pass, Ino used her very last senbon, one she kept underneath her tongue just in case, and spit it at the woman, narrowly missing her neck. Mizuki was surprised at Ino's last attempt to fight back, just as much as she was surprised by Ino taking so many bee stings, but smirked when she saw the blonde girl's head fall forward. Mizuki touched at Ino's neck to find her pulse and found that she was still alive. With all of the poison from the hornets in her system she should have been long dead. Ino used too many ingredients in her own concoctions and just so happened to have built up a bit of an immunity to poisons that could be found untampered with in nature, even hornets' poison. Still, her body took the effects of it. It was only that such a thing wouldn't easily kill her. You could be pretty useful alive as a prisoner though. Pondered Mizuki before calling upon the hornets around her to begin to crowd Ino's body, constructing something solid around her entire frame. Even if you aren't useful to this mission, you are from Konoha, and from a prominent clan, Little Miss Yamanaka. That has to mean something to Iwa, I imagine. With few. Great, so in her endeavor to try and meet up with Team 10 after she almost had thoughts of leaving them, Fu wound up running into another swarm of bees that sent her in the other direction. Her retreat back led her to come across the bodies of the Taki team that had given her the orders to lead Team 10 towards Konoha so that the entrance to Takigakuer wasn't compromised. Oh no. Fu thought to herself, stopping momentarily to look over the bodies. Yeah, they were stung. It was strange because more than a few months ago she wouldn't have cared any less that they were dead. She might have even spared a smirk. She then noticed the captain of the squad encased in beeswax and shook her head at the position of his head and neck. The suicide move that many upper-level Taki ninja knew. They didn't want to give up the location to their village, you know. Fu heard that echoing voice and immediately headed off in the direction of it, a touch of anger running through her system. She might not have liked them that much, but they were still her villagers and none of them had ever been the ones to test her special abilities when she was a little girl. They had been alright with her. And besides, if anyone was going to beat up and possibly kill anyone in her village it was going to be her, dammit. She was the one that had more right to than anyone else. Eventually, Fu came across a structure that she knew for sure wasn't there before. The forests around her village were well scouted in case anyone ever got close to discovering Taki's entrance by accident, and she would have known full well if there had ever been an oversized hive made out of rock. A sneer crossed Fu's face as she moved to demolish that piece of crap until the voice spoke up again. Stop right there for just a moment. Fu did just that as she saw 2 people standing on the top of the hive along with another figure that seemed to be cocooned in beeswax. A large cloak-wearing man with a beard and black hair and a woman with brown hair in a short kimono. Why should I stop? I'm just a few steps away from rearranging your faces for life. Mizuki smirked and pulled away some of the beeswax from the figure that was on top of the hive with them to reveal it to be Ino, because if you can live with having some girl that has nothing to do with this blood on your hands, I wonder what kind of person that makes you. It's simple really. Kurabaka said calmly, having drawn a kunai that he held above Ino's head. All we want to know is the location of the entrance to Takigakuer. Once we have that information we can leave. No one else has to suffer. Yet. Fu thought to herself. Due to the location of the lands that happened to be Takigakuer's main operating area and the fact that it and Iwagakuer were the 2 closest hidden villages in existence by a large margin, the fact that Iwa did not have Taki's location was something that kept an unstable balance between the two, that kept war from breaking out between them, as the two constantly stepped on one another's toes and were constantly at odds during missions. The fact that Iwa couldn't locate Taki was the only thing that kept the larger and more powerful village from simply beginning a war against them and wiping them out in quick order before their ally Konoha could turn around and come to their defense. Without the anonymity of their village's location, there would be nothing stopping it. But it was Ino there. And while she didn't know the girl all that well outside of the few times they had spoken, it was obvious that she was Naruto's friend, his close friend. And he was her friend too. Despite herself, she liked the younger brat of a Jinchuriki, even with all of his past attempts to obnoxiously get her to hug him. Even if you didn't care for this girl's life. Suzumibuki said as multiple hornets started emerging from the hive, settling over the area. Attacking us wouldn't be wise anyway. But like we've said, we're not here to fight. All we want is a little information. That's all. Being surrounded by the hornets once again got Fu to feel a bit smothered and crowded. The buzzing felt like the suspicious whispers of the villagers from her past. Her breathing started to get a little heavier and heavier, and her chakra started to spike a bit in lieu of the growing tension and potential hostility. It's either watch the friend of a friend die, or betray a village that doesn't love me but I still hold a duty towards. Either way I'm screwing myself over. She'd be a traitor, or she'd earn the outright hatred of the first person that ever gave a damn about her and her well-being. Ino. At that moment, when Fu heard the voice of Naruto's that she remembered from a specific point during the Chunin exams, she decided to make her own move then and there before the situation got even more out of control. Hiden, Rinpungaku no Jutsu, secret, hiding in scale powder jutsu. Fu exhaled a massive amount of shining powder from her mouth that shone brightly enough to blind everyone and everything in the area. This did not affect Naruto due to the fact that he had his goggles down around his eyes, and upon entering the area wasted no time upon spotting Ino and snatching her from the top of the hive and from the clutches of the bee users. It's that stupid brat again. Kurabaka said as his vision came back from Fu's surprise attack and he was able to see again, using Misaigaku no Jutsu, hiding with camouflage jutsu. Against that kid is a gamble, he can tell where you are somehow. Fu smirked at the sight of the orange aura blazing around Naruto's body as he set Ino down next to her. Welcome back. She then addressed the ninja trying to get her village location with a much brighter outlook. So do you really want to find my village's location so bad that you'll fight 2 Jinchuriki for it? She said before she began radiating green chakra much like Naruto did, her eyes glowing green eyes not promising anything good. The matching death auras between the two, both orange and green, were extremely intimidating to the 2 Iwa ninja who had 2 Jinchuriki of their own in Iwagakure, one of whom happened to be very dangerous even to other villagers. You and him? Suzumibuki asked with wide eyes before going into denial on the matter. There's no way you two are Jinchuriki? You're just kids. Every ninja starts out as a child at first, you know. Fu taunted before from the red cylinder on her back had her chakra wings sprout and levitate her off of the ground. Even Jinchuriki like us, even a runt like him. Naruto ignored the good-natured jibe at his height or lack thereof and ducked down to rip the wax off of Ino, shaking her in an attempt to wake her up. Ino-chan. Naruto said, noticing her stir and wrinkle her nose to show that she was still alive. This got him to smile and sigh in relief. Losing their main bargaining chip in one move, Kurabaka grit his teeth and formed hand seals to punish the kids for their treachery. You all made a grave mistake. I hope this was worth your lives. Haki Senbon no Jutsu, 1000 bee stings jutsu. The hornets surrounding them fired their stingers at the 3 and attracted Naruto's attention from his teammates' well-being long enough to let out a deafening roar. The thin orange shockwave released from his sheer, cubit-charged roar blew Fu's hair and looser articles of clothing around as she had to shield her face from it and focus to keep from being blown away from him. The hornets and their launched stingers were hit with the shockwave and knocked to the ground. Gritting her teeth as the intensity from the outburst by her fellow Jinchuriki died down, Fu began flying forward at the stunned bee-using pair. They saw her coming and Suzumibuki managed to jump off of the hive only to see Kurabaka try to but freeze in place before he could make his jump. What are you doing? Get down from there. Can't move. Kurabaka said, seeing a shadow stretching across the ground, linking him to something in the forest. And this left him at the mercy of the charging Fia, who had her look of anger clear on her face for the attempt at holding her hostage by her morals. Keishi Gomufer, eraser blow. Fia's high-speed punch, delivered with the added hardness of her body, drilled into Kurabaki and sent him flying back hard enough to fell trees as his body smashed through their trunks. Kurabaki! Suzumibuki shouted before jumping into the air to avoid the shadow that just so happened to have been chasing her, dumb luck saving her from being caught and suffering the same fate as her brother. She made a different series of hand seals and pressed her palm on the air, Kuchi Yasei no Jutsu, summoning jutsu. In a puff of smoke, a giant bee with fur around its neck, a massive stinger, and a jaw full of intimidating teeth was summoned with Suzumibuki sitting in its back. Not showing any fear, as apparently both had seen and had charged at bigger opponents before, Naruto and Fu rushed towards the creature until getting blown back by intended flaps of the giant bee's wings that kicked up a strong wind. Fu flew back and grabbed Naruto's ankle before he could be hurt, but this allowed Suzumibuki to get distance into the air with her bee to begin flying away. Fu began to fly up in pursuit, but the bee spat out a massive amount of honey that covered much of the sky and forced her to turn her back to try and avoid being covered in the dangerous attack. Damn it, she's running away. Shikamaru had made his way over from his ambush spot to Ino's downed form, watching as Suzumibuki's massive bee flew northwest away from them. There's no reason to chase her, he said, not seeing or desiring any reason to continue the battle any further. She's got nothing, and all you have to do is go home. She's the last one left and she still can't find your village. You won. Glaring at the sky with her glowing green eyes, Fu settled down and landed calmly on the ground, her Nanabe's chakra vanishing once more. Realizing that she was still holding onto something in one of her hands, she held up an equally calmed Naruto by the ankle, who just stared blankly at her until grinning at her through his goggle-clad eyes until she dropped him. Ow! In the end, Shikamaru couldn't really blame Suzumibuki for retreating. He himself had killed one of her teammates previously, and it had been 2-on-2 against a pair of Jinchuriki Chunin before he had ever interjected himself and assisted Fu in easily hitting Kurabaki with a killing blow. Fighting 3-on-1 against a group including 2 Jinchuriki was not honorable, it was the epitome of suicidal. A sigh came from Fu, remembering seeing the bodies of her Takigakuer comrades. She wished that she could have gotten the last attacker as well, but at least she got their vengeance on Kurabaki if nothing else. With a grunt, Shikamaru picked up Ino bridal style and walked over to the pair of Jinchuriki, Naruto getting up off of the ground and dusting himself off, and Fu pondering just how she was going to tell her village leader that she was the last survivor of a squad that was dispatched only to retrieve goods from a delivery team. You guys didn't have much of a choice, but still, thank you. Fu said earnestly with a small smile on her face, but now I've got to go home and tell the higher UPS what happened. Those guys all deserve to be buried. Well, I guess that's our cue to go home then, Shikamaru said, shifting Ino's weight in his arms and wishing that she'd wake up soon before he had to carry her halfway back to Konoha. After this, I'm not even going to bother asking if we can rest in your village, it'd be too troublesome after all of this. He finished in a grumble, hoping that they could reach the outpost town at the border by nightfall for a night with an actual bed. While Shikamaru was making sure that he and Ino were ready for travel, Naruto turned towards Fu and, much like he seemed to try and do repeatedly when in her presence, opened his arms to gesture for a hug. And just like all of the other times, Fu gave him a deadpan look, putting the two into something of a standoff until Fu finally relented. Okay, damn it. One time is all you get, and if I accidentally crush you, it's not my fault. With a grin on his face, Naruto stepped forward with full confidence. You won't hurt me accidentally because you know I won't hurt you. I'm not a threat. With that, he wrapped his arms around the body of the tan, mint green-haired older Jinchuriki and felt her do the same, somewhat tightly, but it didn't hurt, showing that she was holding back. Take care of yourself, Fu. I'll try to, she said before releasing Naruto and pushing him back to give him a look full of intent. If you tell anyone I let you do that, I'll find you and I'll dash dot. I won't tell anyone, Naruto nervously assured her, knowing that she could certainly back up the underlying threat. As Shikamaru leapt off to begin moving through the trees back towards Konoha, Naruto refrained from doing so for a minute. Wait. Before I go, there's supposed to be a group of super strong ninja out there that are supposed to be trying to grab the Kyuubi out of me one day. What are you telling me for then? Fu asked. Do you want me to help you or something? No, it's just Concern was evident on Naruto's face before he simply came out with what he was trying to say. If they want me, then they'll probably want the Nanabi too. And if they take our Biju out of our bodies, we'll die. Fu nodded, having known that much already, so I just wanted to tell you that. I don't know how strong these guys are, but they're all S rank and that means they're all way stronger than me. Ah. Little Runt is all worried about me. Fu said, putting a hand on the shorter Naruto's head to ruffle his hair. Look, your fancy trick from the Chunin exams aside, I know I'm stronger than you, so don't worry about it. But I'll keep on training and stay on the lookout to keep you calm. Now go home, kid. She finished, turning Naruto around and giving him a kick in the butt with a playful look on her face to get him to leave. Sparing one glare behind him as he rubbed his backside from Fu's kick, Naruto gave her a wave before taking off to follow Shikamaru. Fu waited for a moment until she was certain that Team 10 had indeed left the area before beginning to make her own way back to her village. Sigh, time to face the music, I guess. Skies above the way back to Iwagakure. That entire mission had fallen apart after the Takigakure captain had killed himself to keep Suzumibuki and her brothers from getting the location of the minor hidden village. And then they had engaged in battle with not just a team of Konoha Chunin, but they had fought two Jinchuriki from both Taki and Konoha. And now her brothers were dead. She had seen Hibashi's body while she had been retreating. The hopes that instead of being dead he just retreated before them were not upheld when she had seen the corpse through the trees. Now what was she going to do? Running away was the only option that she had and the only option that she would take. Going back for revenge against Naruto and Fu would not have ended well, and she wasn't the type to kill her enemy at the cost of her own life. That was just a waste of her life, and their clan didn't need to take another hit like that. Look at what we have here, Sasori no Dana. A lost Kamaizuru clan woman, In the air along with her was a very large clay bird that lowered itself from above directly in front of Suzumibuki. That clay looked familiar, and there was only one person that would have used such a thing that she as an Iwagakure ninja knew very well, you, Deidara. Why was this traitor here? To take her down? No, she wasn't important enough at all in Iwa's hierarchy for him to go after for any kind of missing nin vendetta. The man Deidara had long blonde hair in a ponytail with a bang covering one blue eye underneath his straw hat, an Iwagakure headband with a slash through the village symbol on the plate, and he wore a long black cloak with red clouds all over it. Also on the bird was another man with a hunched back and angry eyes dressed exactly like Deidara with the cloak and straw hat. I see you've had a bit of trouble with our future target, He quipped at Suzumibuki's defeated state. I saw the whole thing. So much for the Kamaizuru clan, Your target. Suzumibuki said, confusion evident in her tone of voice. What business would you have with Taki? You left Iwa to be a terrorist bomber. Not Taki, just the Jinchuriki of Taki. Deidara clarified, the rest of that place is useless, Deidara. The other figure on the flying claybird said to get his partner's attention in a gruff tone of voice, we've wasted enough time here. Our mission is complete. We should return. Leader Sama should not be kept waiting. A frown came over Deidara's youthful face before he shrugged, I guess you're right, Sasori no Dana, Well, Suzu-chan, it was nice to see you again. When you get back to Iwa to get your ass chewed out by old man Onaki, tell him I said hi. He said before turning an about face with the bird to head off his own way. Suzumibuki watched him go a short distance before remembering that Deidara was a criminal of the highest order. Wait a minute. Do you really think that I'll just let you leave so easily? You stole our village's secret kinjutsu and you used it for hired terrorist bombings. You're the most wanted man in our village. However, Deidara didn't really pay her any attention, instead continuing to fly on ahead with Sasori. After the horrible day that Suzumibuki had been having, being blown off by a criminal from her own village after expressly declaring that she could not and would not let him simply fly off into the sunset was simply the last straw for her. Kyodebuki, do not let them get away. Take Deidara down. She shouted, and the giant queen bee began buzzing aggressively, flying straight ahead with stinger prepared to attack. Katsu. Deidara made a single hand seal and the multiple clay insects that he had secretly managed to slip onto Suzumibuki's giant bee before he made his presence known to her, just in case of hostility, exploded in a fiery blast in the sky. A sigh came from the criminal bomber as he spared a glance back at the remnants of the explosion before turning his attention right back to flying the clay bird they were on. Stupid girl. I was going to let you just leave. You should know better than to stand against my Shunshin no Geijutsu, art of a single moment. Fools in Iwa should know by now that true art is an explosion. Save your stupid theatrics for idiots that care. Sasori said, as gruffly and as impatient as before, I could walk faster than this. Then why don't you, Takigaku no Sato, early evening. Fu climbed out of the water that housed the secret tunnel that served as Takigaku's natural hidden barrier from the rest of the world and just sat on the shore, legs still in the water and her hands on her cheeks. She had informed her higher UPS of just what had happened and had led them back to the places where she found her deceased comrades. She had just finished assisting with transporting their bodies back to the village for memorial purposes and had been the last of the group back in. What a long day. Even though she was soaking wet and the sun was going down, she didn't care at all. All of those people had died. Despite the way she used to be, she had never wished to kill that many. She still kept that much of her morals about her even in her darkest of moments. And now she really felt sorrow for the deaths of those that she might have been able to save if she had been there. Wasn't that a Jinchuriki's main purpose in the first place? To serve as a deterrent and in worst-case scenario as a super soldier? She didn't feel much like a super anything right then, as she was too late to help anyone other than Ino. At least she could take solace in the fact that things could have been worse. There she is. Fu's head turned around quickly at that shout that she just knew was directed at her and saw dozens of villagers coming her way. Her natural reaction was to prepare her body for anything that would be coming her way, as she was still uneasy with being crowded and being around many people. And aside from that, many people paying attention to her had traditionally never ended well for her. Perhaps it was finally time that they tried to take the Nanabe out to look for a new host. Look, I'm sorry, alright. I did my best and I know that it's not much that I'm the only one that came back, but dash dot. She protected the village from those Iwa monsters that killed our ninja. All by herself? She's a hero. See, Mom. I told you Fu-chan isn't bad. She's really pretty and she's strong too. A little girl said, tugging on her mother's skirt as she pointed at Fu. As the villagers chattered in approval to her, Fu had her orange eyes as wide as saucers and her mouth hanging slightly open at people actually speaking favorably of her for once. Fu. Her attention was then obtained by someone making his way through the crowd to get to her. Hookie. Fu said questioningly upon seeing her teammate from the Chunin exams so excited. He turned out to be a very nice person that didn't hate her and was actually grateful for even getting him as far through the Chunin exams as he had gotten. What's going on? I'm not in trouble? They're not going to take the Nanabe out of me, are they? Taking the Biju out of her would mean death. No. No way. Hookie said, getting a hold of Fu's hands to help her out of the water to her feet. She was so stunned and confused that she didn't register the contact as a threat and allowed him to do so. Everyone knows what you did out there for us by yourself. The bodies of the enemies were recovered and the recovery teams saw all of the huge bees on the ground all over the place. So I'm not going to be executed. Fu said hopefully, as she was still wary of the crowd that seemed to be growing, though she could see no ire in their eyes. People are proud. You tell me. Hookie said with a grin as he still held on to Fu's hand and lifted it into the air to get cheers from the people. Taking that moment, he whispered so that only she could hear him, people haven't felt that way about you since you did so well during the Chunin exams. The only person that beat you or even came close was that Kyubi kid from Konoha. They were just confused on what to make of you for the longest time. You did this for yourself. You're not a bad person. You're just scared. But not everyone in the world wants to hurt you. Give someone a chance and you might be surprised. I know I was. What's the matter with Fu-chan? Is she alright? One of the little kids that had been hoisted up on their parents' shoulders to see over the crowd said when they saw tears start to roll down Fu's face. Noticing exactly what the little girl was talking about, Hookie turned towards Fu in a bit of alarm. Fu, are you alright? You weren't hiding being hurt again, were you? No ill intent whatsoever as he looked at her. Hookie never had ill intent when he looked at her. There had been fear at one time, but that was mostly because of Dorobu and not her. Other than that, Hookie had been nothing less than cordial. I know that it sucks being by yourself. And for a long time it'll be hard trying to find someone that you can trust, but when you do I promise it makes everything better. Just, don't give up, alright? You're better than that. I promise that it'll be worth it in the end if you can find someone like that. Why did Naruto's words from after their fight in the Chunin exams keep ringing out in her head? And why did they affect her like this? She was supposed to be tough, the strongest kunoichi in Taki, and the biju in her body had nothing to do with it. So what did that say when she was crying like a normal woman in front of what seemed to be a fourth of the village? Last time no one saw it. This time it was happening in front of everyone. But instead of making her look weak to them all, it seemed to further humanize her in the eyes of many. Stupid little runt. Sniff, what does he know anyway? Fu said to no one in particular as she continued to unknowingly shed tears of joy. A few days later, Konohagakure no Sato, Yamanaka clan compound, main home. On the way back to Konoha following the conclusion of their delivery mission, Ino was actually less antagonistic to her male teammates, speaking to them slightly more than before, stopping with the heated glares that both boys felt burning into the backs of their heads all the way up to Takigakure, but she was still not her normal cheerful self, and for the most part she refrained from speaking. The only question she wanted to ask was one that they wouldn't give her answer to: what would it take to make you both stay? And that was a question she didn't bother asking either way. So after arriving back, delivering their mission report, and parting to head their separate ways, Ino went right home and just sat on her bed staring out the window of her room at the night sky. Kami, she was so pathetic. Who in the world said that she needed them that much? She wasn't supposed to be some pathetic little girl, she was a Konoha Chunin. The Hokage saw enough in her to promote her, so why couldn't she just get over this and be done with it? Ino, can I come in? Hearing her father Inoichi at her door, Ino turned away from looking out of the window lest he believe that she was desperate or something, and turned to lay down in her bed as if she were exhausted from her mission. Yes, Daddy. You can come in. The door opened to reveal the taller Yamanaka patriarch that Ino graced with a smile. Hi. How was your week? Oh, the moments when I wasn't worried about my little girl's safety were pretty good. Inoichi said with a smirk as he walked into Ino's bedroom. So how'd the mission go? It turned into a big mess. We had to fight a team of Iwa shinobi that were trying to get into Takigakure's secret entrance. Ino could still feel the phantom stings on her arms, legs, and face. Stupid bees. Well, if nothing else, I'm glad you're alright. Inoichi said with a grin. I'm proud that you're doing so well in your first year as a ninja. You're outdoing your old man's own rookie year the way you're going. Ino blushed in a bit of embarrassment before deciding to ask a question. Daddy. You and your team don't work together that much anymore, do you? She asked, getting a shake of the head from her father. Why did you all break off? I thought that Ino Shikacho was the strongest combination in the elemental nations. Well, we were all needed elsewhere. Inoichi said with a shrug. We still do work together all the time and our families are still really close, but we all had different directions to go in. I took up a job in the intelligence division and now I run it. Shikaku is the Jonin commander, and like the rest of us Choza had our clans to run otherwise. It happens. Elites aren't kept together usually. They're often spread out to balance squads that need them so that they can ensure that more ninja make it home from dangerous missions. Why are you asking? She thought about telling him, but then remembered what she thought earlier, that she wasn't some little girl and that she could solve her own problems. It was an issue between herself, Naruto, and Shikamaru. No one else really had any business getting involved. Just curious. Ino said with a slightly nervous laugh that Inoichi raised an eyebrow at. Okay. Turning back towards the door, Inoichi stopped at the doorway and faced her once more. Oh, I came in here in the first place because you have a visitor. If it's Naruto or Shika, I don't want to see them right now. Just Naruto and not Goldie-kun like usual? Well, it was between them and not him, Inoichi figured. It's not either of them. It's actually your team's sensei. He saw Ino perk up in interest as she hadn't really seen Asuma since their mission to Digarashi port due to a longer mission that he had been on right afterwards. Do you want to see him? Yeah, of course. Ino said with a nod. With that, Inoichi left the room and in a matter of moments Asuma was standing in the doorway, leaning against the frame. Hi Asuma-sensei. Where've you been for most of the month? Oh, just on a mission, and no, I can't tell you what it is. Asuma said with a grin. chuckling at Ino's pout due to being denied something that she might have been able to use as gossip later. With the ice between him and his pupil broken, Asuma shut the door for a semblance of privacy. So I came here to tell you something that I'm not sure if Naruto or Shikamaru got to tell you. In a few months. They're running off to the daimyo. Ino finished for him on a bitter note, to wipe his ass and be his gopher. Asuma raised an eyebrow at how she had finished his sentence. Not exactly what he was going to say. Well, I guess that means that when I was your age I ran off to the daimyo to wipe his ass and be his gopher, too. Ino had the good grace to look bashful at that point. Listen, there's something about this that you need to know as to why they're going. It's about Naruto, but Shikamaru knows too. It's the main reason why he chose to go. Instead of making a remark or choosing to shoot her mouth off about whatever reason they had being stupid, she just sat there on her bed and listened quietly. She had waited a week to learn the reason behind it, but she didn't want to talk to Naruto and Shikamaru about it any longer. Taking a minute to think of how to properly word it, Asuma walked over to Ino and pulled up the chair from her desk to sit by her bed. Okay, well, it's like this. There just so happens to be a group of cage-killing ninja called Akatsuki that are going to try and grab Naruto and every Jinchuriki they can for the demons inside of them. Ino's jaw dropped, but Asuma kept going. He can't beat them. And this place, with the daimyo, this is where I became powerful. As a member of the 12 Guardian Ninja. That's what Naruto and Shikamaru have the chance of becoming. Naruto's going to be hunted. Like an animal? For the stupid demon fox inside of him? Just how many of the hits would keep on coming for that kid? He's going to be watched over by Jiraiya-sama and taken out of Konoha to continue his career and training with a bit of anonymity. Asuma explained for Ino's benefit. Only you, myself, Hokage-sama, and Jiraiya-sama know of this except for Shikamaru. And since Shikamaru was offered the same job, I told him to explain why no matter what Naruto would be going. He chose to go. Ino blinked blankly but understood at that point why Shikamaru would bother doing something so troublesome. Even if he happened to be lazier than a sloth, when it came to his friends he'd do whatever he felt he had to do. It was pretty much his only motivation to do anything difficult. That's why they're going. Asuma nodded in response to Ino's question and put a hand on her shoulder. I didn't expect that. Heh, and I can't go with them either, can I? Asuma shook his head this time. The job offer was just a means to an end. If it hadn't been presented, then Jiraiya-sama still would have taken Naruto away from Konoha on a training trip to help him prepare for the Akatsuki. He could tell that all of this information was beginning to wear on Ino and decided to leave it at that. Listen, you've got a choice. You don't have to be a part of this. Naruto's not going to ask you to fight his battles for him, and neither will anyone else. To hell with that, Asuma-sensei. Ino snapped in response. She knew that he was about to give her the chance to cut her ties with Team 10 on even terms so that she wouldn't be involved in Naruto's soon-to-be problem with Akatsuki. My friends are going to work to fight a gang of kidnappers that want Goldie-kun's life, and you think I'm just going to turn my back and walk away? I'm not doing that to him. Not after all of the times he and Shika have saved my ass. A smile slipped onto Asuma's face at seeing an under 5 feet tall blonde teenage girl try to look tough while sitting in her bed. Still though, Ino was tough, and that look on her face let him know that it was as good as assured. With a confident look on her face, Ino reached out telepathically with the only person outside of her clan she could use the jutsu with due to being the closest to him. Do you hear that, Goldie-kun? You and Shika can go off and do your little missions for the daimyo. But you'd better keep getting stronger while you're gone, because if you're not and you come back, I'll kick both of your asses. Meanwhile, Ichiraku Ramen. Naruto had been eating ramen with Iruka and Konohamaru, who had been kept back after class that day for hijinks, when he heard Ino's telepathic message go through his head, alarming him enough to force him to fall out of his stool and backwards onto the floor of the ramen stand. Both Konohamaru and Iruka looked down at Naruto in surprise at seeing him randomly fall out onto the floor. Naruto. Iruka said, worrying about the vacant look on Naruto's face as he might have hit his head. Are you alright? Konohamaru hopped off of his stool and tried to help Naruto sit up. Boss? Are you good? Do you hear that, Goldie-kun? You and Shika can go off and do your little missions for the daimyo. But you'd better keep getting stronger while you're gone, because if you're not and you come back, I'll kick both of your asses. The sound of Ino's determined voice going through his head was melodic to Naruto, as he had missed hearing her speak in such a way for the last week, especially with the nickname. A grin came over his face and he stood up to climb back into his seat, a happier look on his whisker-marked face than he had previously been able to boast. "Yeah," he said as Konohamaru got back into his seat as well. "Yeah, I'm fine. Omaka, training day 7. I can't stand that guy Naruto Onishima." Hanabi huffed as she walked home with Naruto from her day at the academy. She had run into him on the way home and had puppy dog-eyed him into taking her back to the Hyuga clan compound, all the way to the main house, and inside so that she could play with him. But she didn't say that much. No, Hanabi was a noble Hyuga clan member, and they didn't play. "It's like he won't leave me alone. I don't know what that Konohamaru kid's problem is, but ignoring him just makes it all worse." Strangely enough, Hanabi's idea of playing was training. And Naruto had been roped into target practice with kunai and shuriken with the little girl. She certainly did seem to have issues with Konohamaru though. He thought he had worked them out of that when he was guest speaking at the academy. At that time Naruto tried to think about what he could do as far as advice went. "Naruto." Turning around he saw Neji walking towards him with Hinata none too far behind. Her face was red like usual and she didn't address him first, but Neji did. "I didn't know that you were on the grounds." And with Hanabi-sama as well. The two shook hands upon getting close enough and Naruto grinned at the amicable greeting from the stoic branch Hyuga. And that was it. The answer he could give Hanabi: "Okay, little firecracker. Listen up. The best way to make friends with people that don't like you is to beat their asses first." Hanabi's eyes widened and Neji palmed his face at the advice being given to the impressionable little girl, who while she was a Hyuga through and through was still young enough to listen to people that she looked up to, Naruto for some reason being one of those people. "Oh Naruto-kun," Hinata said quietly, her face going even redder as she was slightly embarrassed at his sagely advice to her little sister. Hopefully she herself could fix that later. "Naruto, that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard," Neji said flat out as he didn't care for being subtle when Naruto was poisoning the young mind of the future of his clan. A Hyuga needed poise, grace, social presence. Not a habit of beating up the people that they didn't like. "It's not that stupid," Naruto replied, preparing to hold up his fingers for each corresponding example he could dredge up. "I fought Sasuke and Nami no Kuni for a bit and we're kind of cool now. I met Tenten and fought her 5 minutes later and now we're friends, and you and me kicked each other's asses and now look at us. I'm on your clan's property teaching your little cousin life lessons. That's dash dot." Neji was about to dispute Naruto's point and then make some kind of subtle yet scathing jab at his intelligence as was his way, but stopped when he realized that Naruto was 100% absolutely right. "For the most part, the thing about you and I doesn't count though. I'm nicer than I was for another reason, because of what Hayashi-sama gave me after I returned from Tetsu no Kuni. Which happened after I kicked your ass." Naruto finished with a self-satisfied nod before he leaned down to Hanabi's level. "All you have to do is just wait until it winds up in a big fight. But you have to win, because if you lose someone like Konohamaru will never let you forget it." Naruto loved that kid, but sometimes he just wanted to grab Konohamaru and Nebake slam him on his head. "Anyway, after you win don't rub it in. Just be friendly and humble. And then he'll stop being a jerk." He couldn't explain why it worked the way it seemed to, because it worked a lot. Perhaps because the concussions dealt out caused the other person to think in a different manner than before? In Hanabi's eyes that plan was brilliant. She eventually got to vent some of her righteous pent-up aggression on Konohamaru's face. She got to prove that she was Naruto's legitimate number 2 to the Sarutobi brat, and afterwards she could come out of it in the positive light by taking the high road, thus probably netting her more friends in the future. It was deviously genius in her 8-year-old mind. Naruto Onishima is a tactical mastermind. Overcome with excitement towards her new approach in dealing with her primary rival, Hanabi jumped towards Naruto and wrapped her arms around his neck in a big hug. "Naruto Onishima, that's perfect." Chuckling and picking Hanabi up off of the ground to return the hug from the very cute little girl, Naruto held up a peace sign towards Neji, who was just shaking his head. On the other side though, Hanabi opened her eyes only to sweat drop upon seeing her sister give her a look that stated that she wished it was her in Hanabi's place. "Oh Hinata Onishima. She said quietly in a disappointed tone of voice, "Just tell Naruto Onizuma you like him already so that you can marry him and I can really have him as my big brother." She screamed in her head. Yes. Because that would be perfect for her. Chapter 41, No Turning Back Now. It had been 2 months since the Team 10 mission to Takigakure and Ino's apparent sudden understanding of just why Naruto and Shikamaru were leaving. She still didn't like it, wishing that she could go with them, but without an invitation extended to do so there wasn't anything she could do, so she just gave her not-so-silent support. She even took Shikamaru's idea to take more missions without the two of them to get her used to the process altogether, and while she wasn't happy about it at first, she came forward with the mindset that they would still be there for her when she returned, be it to gripe at them over the mission's difficulty or lack thereof, her teammates on said mission, or any myriad of things that the blonde girl could find something to fill their ears over. But on this particular day, Naruto himself could be found using his day of training being stuck in the Konoha Archive Library. With a new rank he was granted higher clearance, and while not particularly interested in reading anything he had hoped that he could find something worthwhile for himself now that he wasn't restricted to the general knowledge crap that everyone genin and lower got. He had neglected to recall this fact after getting promoted despite having made a few visits to the place since receiving his cool flak jacket to take Shiho to lunch with his team. He had not been there in fact to look for anything in general. There wasn't particularly anything he wanted to know, and his first full library experience while bearing practical fruit was pretty traumatizing in the long run. All Naruto wanted was to see just what his newfound authorization would grant him. It was just too bad that the library was so crushingly boring. Chatting with Shiho was cool, and he even managed to drag Shikamaru along for a bit before he decided to split that scene. He didn't seem to mind talking with the girl either, and Naruto couldn't really tell from the way the light hit her glasses, but Shiho seemed to take a lot of sneaking glances at Shikamaru when she figured he wasn't looking. Either was it was a good place for a nap though, quiet, pretty warm, and the open pages of a book made for a damn good pillow. Thud. Naruto's head snapped up off of the table and out of the book he had fallen asleep trying to get through reading. His head swung around trying to locate the source of his awakening only to see someone pretty familiar taking a seat directly across from him at the table, a series of scrolls out in front of him for reading purposes. Sasuke team. Don't drool in the books. Sasuke said grumpily as he sat down and unfurled a scroll to begin reading through, other people have to read those later. Naruto looked down and saw a small drool trail on the page before shrugging and shutting it. A little drool never hurt anyone, and it would be dry by the time someone else read it. A yawn escaped Naruto's mouth as he slowly rejoined the waking world. What are you doing here? Aren't you supposed to be training with Sakura and Choji? All Sasuke did in response was shake his head without lifting it to look at him. No? Why? Mitarashi Anko is the most insane woman on the face of the planet, replied Sasuke cryptically as he continued to read. Upon hearing that name, Naruto remembered the lady that had been in the forest when Sasuke's seal had broken out of control and they had gone to get him back. What about her? Did you piss her off or something? I don't have to piss her off. And Sasuke hadn't overtly upset Anko since she had taken it upon herself to train with Sasuke in his free periods of time. She was just inherently sadistic and mean-spirited without the emotional fuel needed. I just have to be within view. It can't be that bad. Naruto found himself the victim of a momentarily Sharingan-enhanced glare for his callous comment. Sasuke never really showed that much outward expression about anything, so he couldn't really be lying or exaggerating, because Sasuke was never really one for hyperbole in the first place, really. Sasuke let out a quiet sigh and set his scroll aside to pay more attention to Naruto to get this forward. She's completely insane. The sparring is like a fight with a wild animal. Usually because the fights consisted of him fighting snakes of various sizes, and the missions always end with me limping back home and her barely having a scratch on her at all. Because the bulk of the missions that Anko ran were assassination or combat missions and Sasuke was her diversion 9 times out of 10, that's why I'm here. She told you to come here. That lady really was cruel, making Sasuke go to the Dem library against his will. At least Naruto chose to subject himself to such an excitement-crushing experience. Not a chance. Sasuke said, raising an eyebrow at the thought of Anko telling him to go to the Konoha Archive Library for anything other than looking up information on some missing nin that she might have an inkling to go after, or terrain on the operation ground of a mission. I'm here to stay away from her. She'll never come here looking for me. I can't go to Kakashi and the rest of the team, I can't go home, I can't go anywhere without her finding me. It took a second for the thought of such to register through Naruto's head, but when it did, a grin marred his face that Sasuke didn't exactly find reassuring. What's your problem, Dobe? What's funny? Nothing. It was a blatant lie, as Naruto had to block his own laughter just to get that much out. It's just, the way you say it, it's like Anko is the world's most aggressive fangirl. Before he could descend into too much humor over his own witty observation, a kunai nicked his cheek enough to draw a cut from him, much to Sasuke's horror, as someone was hovering right over Naruto that he didn't want to see. Naruto blinked before letting out a chakra pulse to feel what was behind him. That's Anko, isn't it? World's most aggressive fangirl, am I? Naruto turned his head around enough to see Anko giving him a smile that promised nothing good for him, especially if she was willing to cut his cheek in a public place. I mean, wow, Anko-san, you sure do look pretty today, he said, eyeing the blade that had just been used to cut his cheek. His attempt at flattery had fallen quite flat. You can't maim me in broad daylight. Anko's smile just grew further, and Sasuke just shook his head, forcing Naruto to backtrack his statement. You can't maim me in broad daylight in the middle of the library, you'll get blood all over the books and the scrolls. This actually seemed to give Anko a moment of pause. Well, you have a point, brat. I don't want you to bleed all over things that I might end up reading at one point, so you're safe, she said, giving Naruto a pat on the head that got him to sigh in relief before she smirked at him. But, you've got to leave sometime. And when your foot touches the ground outside your ass is mine, understood? Before a frightened response could come from Naruto, a clipboard that was winged across the room smacked corner first off of Anko's forehead and headband. Ow. The Konoha Cryptanalysis Squad head that had responsibility over the archive library adjusted his glasses on his face after drawing his hand back from the throw he had just nailed Anko with. Stop threatening people inside the library. And be more quiet, dammit. Anko growled and was grateful that she had the metal plate on her headband, or else that would have left a mark. She didn't know that record keepers would have such good aim. Atsuto, there's no one here except me and the brats. Who am I being quiet for? She said, glaring daggers at the man that had just hit her. Actually, your brats, as you called them, they aren't even here anymore. Huh. Anko looked down at where Naruto was sitting to see that he was still there, only with a nervous look on his face now. Sasuke, however, sitting in his place, was Shiho, who was looking quite confused on just what had happened. She was walking past, vision obscured by multiple scrolls she was checking back in, and then she wound up in that seat. At that point Anko remembered something important about Naruto's particular skill set and glared at him in the chair. You're one of those stupid clones, aren't you? Naruto took a moment to think about his response before doing so. I don't think it matters if I say yes or no, because you're still gonna hit dash dot. His statement was discontinued when Anko's hand passed through his head and knocked him into a puff of smoke. Apparently he didn't think enough. No satisfaction was gotten out of punishing a clone of the kid, as there was no lesson learned there. The lesson being to tread lightly around Mitarashi Anko. She figured that Sasuke had learned by now that running away only made things worse, but apparently not. It was a good challenge for the day though, chasing down two Chunin runts to give them their just desserts. All fired up from the challenge at hand, Anko prepared to leave when she saw the scrolls that Sasuke left on the table in his haste to leave. Ugh, this could either be really good or really bad, she said upon seeing that the top open scroll on the table was a record of sanctioned missions under the name Orochimaru. I can't believe I pulled that off so clean, Naruto said, proud of substituting himself with a shadow clone right under Anko's nose without her noticing. It did not meet its demise in vain, as he and Sasuke got themselves the hell out of there as quickly as possible. I'm so awesome, he gloated before glaring at Sasuke as the two of them ran back through the village to put as much distance away from the library as possible. Did you have to use Shiho-chan for a kawarimi? You weren't complaining when I did it, Mr. Morality. You were running ahead of me, Sasuke replied, cutting the same pace as Naruto, as he was well aware that eventually he'd have to pay for skipping out on Anko after she located him once more. He'd deal with that when the time came though. Kami, that woman was annoying. I was there for an actual reason, unlike you, just sleeping in the books. Naruto stuck his tongue out at Sasuke in response. I barely got into what I was looking up on. Well, what was it? That was right. Sasuke had actually been there with a real reason in mind. He had been there too, but he hadn't been looking at anything in particular. His new clearance didn't really net him anything cool to look at. That left him pretty much checking out solo training suggestions for certain types of shinobi. Since he was responsible for himself at this point in time, he didn't want to be one of those types that withered on the vine after making it to Chunin. I've been all over that place with clones. I haven't found any ninjutsu there to learn. A scoff came from Sasuke as they continued moving from rooftop to rooftop. He didn't need to scrounge for jutsu like some others did. Not only did he have the Sharingan and the capability to learn most forms of jutsu from looking at them, he had his own clan techniques to study thoroughly. I wasn't looking for any new jutsu. I was studying what I could on this Orochimaru person. The guy that put this on me. He said, pointing at the seal on his neck. Anko never really says much about him even though he was her sensei. Oh. Naruto said, squinting his eyes as he tried to think. That seal was a nasty piece of work from what he had seen. What was with that foul chakra it produced? It was totally nasty. Well, I was going to go find Ero-sensei right now. You can come if you want to. He offered amicably. Why would I want to go with you to find someone called Ero-sensei? Well, he was Orochimaru's teammate. That was interesting enough. Of course. That was an avenue he hadn't tried to explore yet, mostly because he didn't know where to find the other Sannin, but Naruto could? There was probably something that could be said about that, but instead Sasuke just decided to follow along and see what he could see. Besides, he'd be safer with Naruto. He was quite certain that if Anko came upon them again he could outrun Naruto if need be. Konoha Hot Springs. When Sasuke heard Naruto say that he was looking for one of the most powerful ninja that Konoha had gone on record of producing, he did not believe that such a man would be found at the damn hot springs, but Naruto seemed to be treading around the property as if he knew exactly where he was going, and it wasn't inside of any of the springs. Still, he kept his mouth shut since Naruto seemed to be doing so as well. But he didn't even seem to be looking around or asking for anyone's assistance or anything. All he did was take them both past a changing room and a conjoining bath area to the brush and shrubs alongside it, pushing his way through to a spot at the side of the fence where he actually seemed to find the person that he was looking for, judging by how he was impatiently standing behind the person peeking through a hole in the fence. Ero-sensei. Naruto said, tapping his foot impatiently. Oh. Jiraiya said, still not taking his view away from the hole in the fence. Long time no see, kid. Technically he still hadn't seen Naruto because he was still getting an eyeful of whatever was behind that fence instead of paying attention to the boy standing behind him. What's up? You told Gamekaki to tell me to come find you on Tuesday. It's Tuesday, so what did you want? Naruto sounded a bit agitated because apparently the message had been passed along through his summons had been forgotten by the only other living toad summoner that had left the message in the first place. Oh, will you chill out and just enjoy the sights with your master since you found me in the first place? Jiraiya said dismissively, using a hand to wave off Naruto's question. You really don't want to be in such a rush these days anyway, do you? Take things slow, enjoy the days you've got before the you-know-what. Damn it, Jiraiya, you and your negligence of noticing the second presence. Luckily Sasuke didn't notice or care what Jiraiya was talking about as he walked forward to address the man himself. Are you seriously doing this? You're a legendary ninja. What if someone caught you peeking on girls in the hot springs? A shrug from Jiraiya's shoulders was his initial response. The fact that I like women doesn't make me any less of a badass shinobi, kid. In fact, since you probably think I suck, you'd more than likely underestimate me in a fight if you didn't already know me. And you'd be dead before you even got the superior look off of your face. He turned his head towards Sasuke with a grin. A little quirk here or there actually helps you out a bit, and it just so happens that my quirk is my pure, unfiltered love of the ladies. Sasuke's eye twitched while Naruto palmed his face and spoke. Ero-sensei, even if you weren't just sitting here trying to rationalize peeking on girls in broad daylight, you're talking to the wrong guy about it anyway. Sasuke doesn't like girls. He then felt low killing intent radiating off of Sasuke. What? How else can you explain not letting girls like Sakura and Ino-chan date you in the academy? We weren't even 13 then, you idiot. Sasuke said with a slightly red face, those harpies don't know anything about love or crap like that. They should have been focusing more on being kunoichi than focusing on me. Just because I didn't care about them being stupid doesn't mean I don't like girls. He stated flatly, I've got more important things to do these days anyway. Jiraiya just looked between the two boys before shaking his head and returning his attention to the hole in the fence. Kami kid, you are a total buzzkill. Apparently not enough of a buzzkill to keep him from getting his jollies. He needed to be writing down some of what he was seeing. The star of his next book could be in that water somewhere. I'm going to do you a favor and let you take a look through this opening. See if it doesn't change your whole worldview. No thanks. Sasuke grit out verbally before deciding to get down to business with this apparent legend. I just want to hear about what you know of Orochimaru. That's all. Hearing the name of his old wayward teammate, Jiraiya once again looked up from where he was paying attention moments before to take a better look at Sasuke. You're that kid. He said, remembering what he had heard from the Hokage on Orochimaru's underlings marking a young Konoha ninja during one of his missions, you know. I don't really feel like talking about my bastard ex-best friend and partner and Sarutobi-sensei's favorite ass-kisser/backstabber at the moment, unless you look through this hole in the wall right now. Now in the mind of one such as Naruto, the ultimatum wasn't much of one. He'd have already looked through the hole in the wall without even needing to think about it, and he would have blamed it on Jiraiya's influence corrupting him all the while knowing that he would enjoy every sight he got from it. Sasuke had a little thing called personal pride, and the last of a proud clan such as his was not going to be accused of having voyeuristic tendencies. Still, it was just one quick look through a hole in the wall at a few women. And to get his questions answered it didn't seem like a difficult request. Just one peek and then he'd grill that white-haired old coot for everything he wanted to know. As Sasuke walked towards the hole in the wall to acquiesce to Jiraiya's request, the man himself had slipped up to Naruto's side, both crouched down to observe the process. Hey brat. Jiraiya whispered to Naruto, you're telling me that this kid never paid attention to a class full of kunoichi all fighting over him. He never talked to a single one of them. Naruto tried to talk to them, i.e. Sakura, and got hit for his troubles. Maybe he should have tried not focusing his pickup attempts on just one girl. He might have gotten astronomically lucky and gotten an actual date in the past if he had, but he doubted that would have improved his chances any. Somewhere across the village the only female genin on Team 8 sneezed and gave away her position during tracking and stealth training. But hearing what Naruto had just said put a huge grin on Jiraiya's face. Someone like Sasuke probably hadn't realized just what was so magical about the female frame at this point in time. The kid was such a loner he probably never had the life-changing experience that most men had of accidentally bearing witness to their first naked woman. He was 13 and a total wet blanket, so it was completely plausible that he had never seen such before. That meant that this had the potential to be epic in either one of two ways. Either outcome would be satisfactory to Jiraiya as far as entertainment value went. Gravely unaware of the shock to his system that awaited him, Sasuke reached the hole in the wall and crouched down to get to eye level with it, a single onyx orb peering through to see what lay on the other side. And there he froze. Sasuke's whole face turned red and his eyes widened. Much to Naruto's surprise, instead of blacking out, he actually turned his Sharingan on. Both Naruto and Jiraiya looked at each other, both snickering quietly as Sasuke continued to burn this image inside of his brain for life. Ah, we did a good deed today, brat. And it was something possible lucrative as well, as Jiraiya was already jotting down ideas for a new main character in a future chapter of his novels. A prudish Bishonen elite gets his first look at the most lovely female forms available to male viewing on the planet and finds himself addicted. Man, this crap writes itself. Still laughing as blood began to trickle from Sasuke's nose, Naruto suddenly stopped as he felt the cold hand of death touch his spirit. Whoa. I feel like I just did something to piss somebody off. Who in the world would be mad about something like this? Meanwhile, Konoha Hospital. A bandaged-up Sakura sat on an examination table and gnashed her teeth momentarily before looking around in confusion. That was weird. I really want to smack Naruto one right across the head for some reason. But I haven't wanted to do that since graduation. He isn't even here, and he really isn't the one I should still want to beat up right now. She finished her thought and looked next to her at an equally injured Ino who was sitting on the table as well, pouting. Damn you for it. Ino muttered despondently, really glad that there wasn't a mirror in the room because she didn't want to know what she looked like at the moment. It was a spar. You don't fight like that during a friendly spar. What's wrong with you? Despite saying such, Ino had absolutely no problems with retaliating in kind, which did nothing to de-escalate the situation. What, you can't handle it? Sakura taunted back with a somewhat weak smirk. I thought you were supposed to be a Chunin. Doesn't that make you better than me? I had to fight you harder. And they had both nearly killed each other had it not been for Shikamaru and Chuji, who were also in the room stopping them. Deep down it hurt their hearts to stop a catfight in progress, but the code states that explosions mark the end of a catfight and the beginning of a blood war. Jealous. I can't be jealous of livestock, Ino pig. Before the two could butt heads and continue where they had left off from the training field, Shikamaru's shadow bound the two in place to prevent them from fighting. A sigh of relief came from Chuji, who was seated in a chair next to his old friend, silently thanking him as he didn't want to referee another fight between the two rabid kunoichi, especially in a place of tranquility like a hospital. Stop fighting, dammit! Shikamaru muttered, holding the two girls in place as they continued to glare at each other. This was a total waste of his chakra, playing mediator between the most volatile best friend/worst enemy relationship currently existing in the village. The door opened to reveal Kabuto walking in with a nervous smile on his face, seemingly uneasy at the fact that he had walked in at such an unstable time. You two are fine, he said, getting both Ino and Sakura's attention. Well, other than the injuries of course, but these aren't anything that won't heal by tomorrow if you two can promise me that you won't fight again. The two looked away from Kabuto, getting him to laugh without humor. Ha, well, either way, you two can check out. Thank you, Kabuto-san. Both girls chimered in unison before glaring at one another once again. Seeming to shrink into himself a bit out of bashfulness at the praise, Kabuto waved his hands and his clipboard in front of himself. Ah, it's nothing. With Tsunade-sama and Konoha spending a lot of time around the hospital, everyone's here is working hard trying to impress her. She says she doesn't take students, but no one's really taking that at face value. Wow. Sakura said quietly to herself, Tsunade-sama's student. But she's only taught one person before, right? The Shizuna lady that she usually has with her. Frankly, Ino didn't particularly see what the big deal really was about Tsunade. After getting to experience a big part of her personality in Tetsu no Kuni before and after the Chunin exam final rounds, she didn't particularly wish to be her student. First of all, she wasn't the medic type. Second of all, she more than likely had just as big a sense of person that Tsunade had, and that would lead to way too many clashes of ego that would stress the training dynamic out. This was clearly visible to Sakura, who grabbed Ino's cheek and pulled on it once she heard the blonde girl yawn at the proposition of being trained by a Sunin. You really don't think it would be great to be trained by one of Hokage-sama's 3 famous students? Goldie-kun's getting trained by Jiraiya, and I've been around that guy. Ino replied as she chose not to refer to Jiraiya with any honorifics. In her mind, that man didn't deserve any. She was the only one that could corrupt Naruto and get away with it. If it's anything like that, I don't want any part of it, thank you very much. Our specialties don't match up anyway. All she can train me in that we actually match up on is using poisons, and I study that on my own. It was true. While it wasn't that bad, Ino didn't have the best chakra control, which one needed to be damn near perfect to be a medic nin. She did not have the patience to deal with stubborn injuries, and this patience was not improved upon during her past year working with the laziest man on the face of the planet and an equally as impatient as her fellow blonde with infinite times more energy. She also wasn't a fan of blood or of grievous wounds at all. It wouldn't keep her from operating at full ability, but it was never something she could just be comfortable with. This was why nothing she did, even her killing techniques, made any kind of gory or graphic mess. She now almost exclusively used Senbon to fight instead of kunai and shuriken at this point for this very reason. So being trained by a legendary medic nin would not really be her thing. She wanted to delve further into her clan techniques anyway. They were just starting to get practical as far as direct combat was concerned. You couldn't train with just anyone anyway. You had to be compatible to what you were learning, which was why many Jounin sensei didn't train their students in their own techniques move for move. They were more for guidance and insight on actual real-world shinobi life for young genin than actual handing down of combat techniques. With a point like that, Sakura took on a slightly dejected look. She didn't know anything about medical ninjutsu, and she was more than certain that if Tsunade ever did take a new student, she would most definitely avoid having to train one from the ground up. She was a genjutsu-centric kunoichi. But wait. It was just something she couldn't ignore. It was too useful a skill to have, especially after what had happened to Team 7 in the wilderness. Kabuto-san. Sakura asked with shining emerald eyes, how would someone go about learning medical ninjutsu? There had to be a scroll or a class or something somewhere. Hell, he was a genin and learned it, which was why he worked at the hospital after his team was killed during the chunin exams. Well, you have to be a chunin to get yourself accepted into the training program. Kabuto replied apologetically, running a hand through his silver hair. Sorry, my dad is the captain of the Konoha Medic Corps. He adopted me and taught me everything I know. He then stroked his chin as he tried to think of something, but I guess maybe since I don't work here that much, and I don't really have an active genin team, I could teach you a little bit. Shikamaru, Ino, Chuji, and Sakura's eyes all widened at the offer. That was extremely gracious of the elder genin. He hadn't even asked for anything in return. Nothing at all. In some circles this could be seen as suspicious. Any circle that involves Nara Shikamaru, for instance. Why? Shikamaru asked, narrowing his eyes at the purple-clad medic. For some reason this guy had been latching close to them since the very beginning of the chunin exams. He seemed like a good guy, but it was just kind of weird. It was more than just being friendly. It was to the point where Kabuto was overly helpful and pleasant, more so than any of them were to each other, but like he didn't see them as close enough to banter with, still at the stage of a relationship of trying to keep them liking him. After all of these months he still didn't seem like a friend. Still, Kabuto's answer seemed pleasant, good-natured, and logical enough. There can never be enough medics out there in the field. He looked towards the rest of them with a smile at that point. I can teach you all if you'd like. I'm not doing any chakra control training though. You guys are handling that on your own. No thanks. Shikamaru replied, trying to play off his earlier suspicious attitude towards the young man. I do enough training on my own, and I'm not doing the work to get my chakra control to a needlepoint. More trouble than it's worth. Me either. Chuji quickly declined the offer as well. Heh, what would I look like fumbling through medic nin training? That's not for guys like me. Ino was about to decline as well, seeing no reason to do it since Shikamaru had always been smart enough to keep himself from being hurt even in surefire danger situations, and Naruto seemed to be able to heal from damn near anything aside from being decapitated. But then she remembered that they were mere weeks away from leaving, and that she'd be working with others from then on out. Sakura's follow-up taunt was just the thing that drove the stake into the heart of her accepting Kabuto's offer. Well, I'll take you up on it, Kabuto-san. She said with a bright smile. Ino Pig already said she didn't want to learn any medic techniques. I guess she's just scared of getting left in the dust like she did in the academy. A tick mark formed on Ino's head as she started staring at Sakura with a twitching eye and a smile that did not bode well for the peace of the room. Oh really? Who was the top scoring kunoichi and had the best overall grades? Who got promoted before who? And who kicked whose ass today? If you really want me to prove how much better than you I am again, then I guess I can do that. A palm struck Shikamaru's forehead from his own hand as he shook his head. Chuji just lamely lifted up his finger and pointed out at the two kunoichi with dueling glares. Ino just got goaded into medic training. A nod came from his genius friend. Why aren't we telling her that right now? Because I don't want to deal with the yelling. Jiraiya sat at the edge of a cliff, calmly drinking sake while enjoying the view, Sasuke seated next to him. He took a sip of his alcoholic beverage and sighed contentedly. Oh, my manners need some work, I guess. Do you want some? Sasuke just gave him a deadpan stare in response. Right. Well, what did you want from me again? To tell me about Orochimaru. Sasuke requested. He had followed Jiraiya outside of the village for just this purpose, and now it finally looked like the goof was going to tell him something. Interested in the guy that tagged you? Jiraiya said before getting down to the point of Sasuke's presence. He was a lot like you around that age. A pretty cold guy. His parents were killed too. He noticed a trace of anger appear on the boy's face and nodded as that was what he had expected. It was back during the good old bad days of constant fighting, and I don't think he ever had time to just sit back and deal with it. Even with me and Tsunade there, and Sarutobi-sensei too, he just started drifting further away eventually. Even more than normal. He started taking more joy in fighting foreign shinobi and seeing their skills and jutsu. He loved that part of the whole thing. If he had a Sharingan, I swear he would have been happier than a pig in Desh. Jiraiya then stopped and looked at Sasuke before getting back on track. Either way, he never just gives anyone anything. That nasty seal on your neck makes you a war machine like you felt, but it corrodes your mind and makes you easier to manipulate. That's Orochimaru's MO more or less. He loves the head games. He poked Sasuke on the neck, getting him to recoil a bit. Nothing from him is free. Trust me, he just wants your eyes to pull a Kakashi, or worse. Or worse, because he could have just had his Oto ninja take out Sasuke's eyes instead of just marking his body with that damnable seal. That meant that Sasuke's entire being was of interest to the snake. My Sharingan, Sasuke said, touching at his neck and looking out at the view of Konoha's gates from the cliff they were sitting on. He let out a scoff at the thought of giving anything to someone like that. He'll have to come and get me himself if he wants to have even a prayer of taking my Kekai Genkai, because the clods he sent the first time won't be enough again to beat me. An Uchiha doesn't lose to the same opponent twice, and I know their trick if I have to fight them again. You tell him, Tame. Both Sasuke and Jiraiya turned towards the cliffside to see a single hand plant itself at the summit, pulling a sweaty, slightly bleeding Naruto up with his other hand tied behind his back. After reaching the top, he rolled over onto his back, chest heaving up and down heavily as he stared up at the sky. There. I climbed your stupid cliff. Jiraiya poured himself another cup of sake and raised it in recognition of Naruto's achievement. Good. Now go back down and do it again with your other arm this time. Naruto's head turned robotically towards Jiraiya with a look of astonishment on his face while Jiraiya just proceeded to drink to his leisure. I don't know why you're staring at me. You're burning your daylight. If you want to climb in the dark, that's your thing, but you can't really see that well tonight. New moon and all. Copious amounts of curses, mostly aimed at Jiraiya, spewed from Naruto's mouth. Still, he picked himself up and started climbing his way back down the cliff to start over on climbing the cliff with his other arm tied behind his back and no usage of chakra allowed. This training was intense. Watching Naruto begin his descent back down where he could actually walk back down with his chakra, Sasuke had to admit he liked what he was seeing. It was right up his alley as far as something demanding went. So how did you train him for this? Sasuke asked. I didn't train him for this at all. Jiraiya admitted with a chuckle. I just told him I was going to make him do this months ago and put the fear of Kami into him. He did the rest himself. I still don't know how he prepared for it though. Do you think you could train me as well? The smile dropped from Jiraiya's face as he could see that Sasuke was earnestly asking this of him. Though he tried to hide it, the look on the young Chunin's face was one of smoldering hope. You're good. You're very good. I saw you during the Chunin exams and you earned that vest. You just ran out of luck when you went up against a trained Jinchuriki. But I can't train you. Sasuke's eyes widened before his head sank in disappointment. Why not? He asked, hiding his discontent over Jiraiya's answer. Jiraiya didn't answer at first, instead letting the fading sound of Naruto griping and cursing as he walked down the cliff fill the silence of nature. Eventually he sighed and decided to address the topic. You probably know me as the Yondaime Hokage's sensei, don't you? Sasuke nodded. That was a very good reason to want Jiraiya as his sensei. The man had a track record of talent. What if I told you that I barely taught him how to do anything? What? That can't be true. I'm being honest here. Jiraiya assured him. I gave him the signs for Kuchi Yasei no Jutsu, summoning jutsu. I let him sign the Toad contract. I gave him drills and I watched him grow up into a fine young shinobi. But that was it. He never needed my help. He'd have been great even without me. As proud as he was to have a hand in Minato's development, the most Jiraiya ever taught him was a crash course on seals. Minato was a genius like you, and that was the thing. I'm no genius, and nothing I do is smooth. All of my techniques are hard-nosed power moves. You're a finesse fighter from what I saw. Even your Chidori, 1000 birds, is meant to attack a certain, exact place in particular. A frown crossed Sasuke's face as he more or less broke down what Jiraiya was working his way around to, saying, "Our fighting styles aren't compatible." A sad smile came from Jiraiya as he nodded. The kid really was sharp. He didn't even have to say it, "If I were to train you I'd have to break you down and remake you from the ground up." You don't want that, do you? Sasuke just shook his head. He was an Uchiha, he fought like an Uchiha clan member. That was his pride and he would never wash his hands of that. "Me and the brat, Naruto, we work even better than me and Minato did." He pointed down the cliff at Naruto, who was finally at the bottom, tying himself up to try and climb again. "Minato, if I had tried that with him when he was the kid's age he would have fallen to his death." What makes Naruto so special? Wondered Sasuke aloud. In around a year, Naruto had gone from the laughable dead last to someone he considered right there on par with him. If Sasuke considered himself number 1, Naruto was definitely 1A. What on earth was the deal? Jiraiya pointed over the edge to where Naruto had started climbing. "Well, first of all, he just went up and down, and he's about to climb back up here with one arm. Love Naruto or hate him, you had to respect that sheer stamina. Second of all, he gets my style of fighting even though he's not one for hand seals, so I don't know how many of my own techniques would suit him. He's a grinder, a room sweeper, a party crasher. The exact opposite of you if you want to look at it that way." A grunt of acknowledgement escaped Sasuke as he began to glower at not getting a chance to learn from Jiraiya, even a little bit. "I get it." Well, he didn't just want to leave the kid bitter. Spending so much time with Naruto was softening him up when it came to the brats. "Alright kid. Since you clearly recognize the amazing contributions that the incomparable Jiraiya-sama can provide you in your career, I'll throw you a bit of a bone. I'll give you the hand seals for summon creatures." What good will that do? It wasn't a refusal of the offer, but it was more of a question of what that would do for him. Sasuke was quite certain that Jiraiya wouldn't let him sign the Toad contract, so what would he be summoning? Air? This doesn't leave the mountain, do you understand, kid? Jiraiya said sternly, getting Sasuke to raise an eyebrow at his sudden change of demeanor before quickly agreeing to do so. "Sai, if you don't have a contract with any particular animal you'll be immediately sent to the home of the animal that you have a natural affinity for. But it's dangerous. Just because you show up doesn't mean you can establish a contract. More hot-blooded creatures will either deny you and test you or just try to kill you if they don't want you there at all." And that was why Sasuke could see how showing him summoning was potentially dangerous. There was something about that he liked. Another way to prove himself, another way to get stronger. He turned his Sharingan on and Jiraiya quickly went through the seals, but Sasuke saw them all and had them committed to memory with just one showing. Feeling like he had done his good deed for the day, Jiraiya felt that had freed him up for some debauchery. He stood up and walked to the edge of the cliff as he fished a frog wallet out of his vest. "Hey kid, I swiped your wallet. This is boring, so if you don't finish up within 30 minutes I think I'll go back to town and find Tsunade Hime. Maybe I'll treat her to a few stiff drinks on your dime." That little distraction almost loosened Naruto's grip on the cliff wall enough for him to plummet a few hundred feet to his death, but he re-established it and kept himself climbing, now with a vengeance. "Oi. I need that. I don't have a bank account. I'll invest your hard-earned money into the stock of earning Tsunade Hime's eternal love with booze. When I get up there I'll kill you. You'd better cut your other arm free first, brat." And after watching that back and forth banter and the treatment of master to pupil, Sasuke kind of figured that he'd be better off sanity-wise not being trained by someone as overtly eccentric as Jiraiya. Sometime later, undisclosed location. A rather large squad of Otagaku or shinobi were moving through the woods on their way towards Degarashi port. The ships were up and moving in and out like clockwork, and Orochimaru's planned joint operation with the current Mizukage was beginning to take shape as their force kept building up in Mizu no Kuni's outlying islands. If things went well he would have bases in Mizu no Kuni, he would have his pick of domestic bloodlines to pick and choose to study, and he would possibly have a potential ally to get into his ear. Orochimaru required an ally due to the fact that he had his eyes on turning that village to a smoking crater in the ground. At the head of the traveling team was Kimimaro. While the Sound Four would remain running Orochimaru's own missions, he would be heading towards his birthplace to run things there. Failure would not be an issue as long as he was there. Suddenly the entire squad came to a halt while Kimimaro continued to jump from branch to branch. He quickly realized that he wasn't being followed any longer and turned around to find his team no longer there. It was strange because he had only taken 2 more hops prior to turning around. Without saying a word, Kimimaro pulled a dagger made of bone right from his body and stabbed himself in the shoulder without pause. The scope of the genjutsu shattered to find that the lot of Otagaku or shinobi with him happened to now be unconscious and littering the forest floor, strewn about. "I've come for you to send a message to your master." Standing directly behind Kimimaro was a taller figure wearing a concealing black cloak with red clouds and a straw hat. Before the figure could even finish his statement, bones jutted out of Kimimaro's body like spikes and impaled the person that then burst into a flock of crows. Amidst the crows, Kimimaro immediately dropped down to the ground from his branch and landed on the ground, holding his dagger and ignoring his shallow self-inflicted wound with almost robotic concentration. He would need every bit of it for someone as skilled as this. Kimimaro couldn't objectively judge how long he had been in the genjutsu, but it was long enough for whoever was there to defeat the entire squad and not long enough for them to finish the job against him. "A message to my master," he said, settling himself in a gracefully refined taijutsu stance in preparation to defend from any direction. "Well, please, tell me of this message. I'll make sure Orochimaru-sama receives it after I report to him on your death, whoever you may be. How foolishly arrogant to believe you can simply kill me." A voice spoke again, seeming to reverberate in Kimimaro's head. A nice little parlor trick, but he had dealt with far more attempts at intimidation in the past. This couldn't even cause him to blink. "The only reason you still live is by the virtue of my mercy." Still, Kimimaro did not move an inch, his body coiled to spring to assault at the first given opportunity. "From your attire you are clearly Akatsuki, one of Orochimaru-sama's sworn enemies. What you have to say means nothing to me, and less to him. The only thing that has any meaning here is your death." With something of a sixth sense, Kimimaro turned in the direction of where he felt the enemy and aimed his hand and fingers straight out. Teshi Senden, 10 finger drilling bullets. From his fingertips, 10 hard bones were shot out, spinning as they hurtled through the air. The shots missed the enemy, but drilled right into the tree that they hit afterwards. Bearing witness to the target of his attack darting around the forest faster than Kimimaro knew he could reasonably keep up with, black marks spread across his body from the strange tattoo on his collarbone. "I see I will have to take you seriously. As far as trash goes, you are admittedly something special to force me to this point." Having had enough of the whole song and dance, the cloaked figure appeared a ways away in front of Kimimaro, standing there nonplussed at his first stage cursed seal appearance. "I'll repeat myself," the person said, reaching for their straw hat to take it off of their head. "I have a message for your master, from Uchiha Itachi." This only made Kimimaro's anger spike higher. Orochimaru often cursed the name of the man that took his right hand in battle years ago. How dare Itachi choose to refuse allowing his body to play host to Orochimaru's soul? Still, Itachi ignored the younger man and continued to speak. "Tell him that I hold no lingering feelings towards his previous attempt to take my body. I acquired my pound of flesh in return in the end. But, I have heard of him taking something of an interest in my younger brother." At that point, Itachi's Sharingan eyes morphed into a strange, foreign pattern. "If he is foolish enough to continue down this avenue, I'll teach him more about the power of the Sharingan than he would have ever wished to know. I still need something from Sasuke that overrides Orochimaru's revolting ambition." In a flash, Itachi was not only gone. Kimimaro was not on the ground. He was still standing on the tree branch he had stopped on, just short of burying his bone dagger into his body as he had figured he had done previously to break the genjutsu. "Uchiha Itachi," Kimimaro thought to himself, "he didn't kill a single one of these shinobi." He took note of as he observed his defeated force closely. What a frighteningly powerful man. If this is an example of his abilities, then I must get stronger for the sake of Orochimaru-sama. This trip to Mizu no Kuni would serve as his method of growing in strength. To destroy his beloved master's enemies, to crush any threat intending to cause that great man harm. Kimimaro would gain enough strength to bring down the 5 Kage themselves. Later that week, Kanahagaku no Sato, Team 10 training ground. Well, this was it. Tomorrow morning at the crack of dawn Naruto and Shikamaru would be departing for the capital of Hinokuni. He hadn't been so nervous since the night before team assignments. He sat underneath the large tree in the middle of the mostly open field that comprised the area with a water balloon in his hand that Jiraiya had told him to pop by using his chakra to spin the water in it. Apparently the process of getting him prepared to climb that cliff one-handed was to ensure that he had the strength of will and focus to make learning the forthcoming jutsu easier. Still, it was too hard to focus on learning a step toward piecing together a jutsu during a time like this. For all intents and purposes he was moving out of Konoha for a few years, and that was a big deal. He supposed he could just see it like one really long mission since that was in essence what it just so happened to be, but that would have seemed a little impersonal. There he went again, overthinking things. Feeling that way about the way things would work out tomorrow and onward wouldn't change anything, and he wouldn't just wake up the next morning to realize that the entire job acceptance was a dream of some sort. With a sigh he reached for his vest pocket and grabbed a cigarette that was then placed into his mouth and lit. He was going to miss that thing, and his headband too. He couldn't wear anything in the field during his mission with the daimyo connecting him with Konoha, so no flak jacket or village identifying plate. Naruto spared a glance at the water balloon in his other hand and then at the spent cigarette butts lining the ground under where he was sitting. How long had he been there again? Man, if Kurenai saw this I'd never hear the end of it about me being a bad influence and all of that. Hey Asuma-sensei. Naruto said in a reserved manner, not even turning to face the man that was standing and leaning against the side of the tree he was sitting underneath. Damn. The bearded Jonin replied in a seemingly disappointed manner, I was expecting to scare the hell out of you at least one more time before you go off on your great adventure of a lifetime. There's got to be something renting out space in that empty head of yours if I couldn't get a jolt out of you. Naruto spared Asuma a glance and smiled slightly, adventure of a lifetime? There's no way this could be any worse than some of the stuff I've done already. He was just a daimyo's guard ninja, and apparently there would be at least 2 more just like him, not even counting Shikamaru. How off the wall could it be? And then Asuma started laughing. Oh, that's the best joke I've heard in a while. The older man said, finding it prudent at the moment to ruffle Naruto's hair even if he knew the boy hated being treated like he was short. Kid, working for the daimyo, do you know what that includes? Protecting him. Yeah. Asuma nodded, still grinning widely, protecting him, and his family, and his family's close acquaintances, and anyone that provides a decently important service to the daimyo. It was clear that it wasn't lost on Naruto just how many people that could potentially be, not to mention that the protection of the daimyo also means protecting the daimyo's affairs as well. So you're going to be running missions of great importance for him, and failing could lead to strained international tensions to say the least. What? Now a few 13-year-olds would think that it was pretty cool that this many lives would directly depend on them, and that they would be guaranteed to be doing so many important jobs. But then again, Naruto could now see why it was invite-only, and why that Kotoko girl said something about them needing to push their numbers back up to 12. Because with job expectations like that it was kind of easy to see there being a lack of an adequate workforce willing to venture that way and work for the man. The daimyo wasn't really loyalty-inspiring to hidden village shinobi, and dying for something trivial for him clearly didn't suit most ninja. How did the daimyo become daimyo in the first place? Probably because the original was a person rich and influential enough to fund the hidden villages comprised of all of the clans he regularly hired for work, so they put control of the countryside into his hands while they maintained a standing military in the villages. Why was he thinking about that when he barely knew what he was talking about? Damn Shiho. So more or less dash dot. Asuma continued, stroking his beard in an astute manner as a man of experience, you've just signed up for a non-stop series of B2S rank missions until your contract runs out. Hey, times weren't as tumultuous these days as they were back when he himself worked for the daimyo, so maybe things would be slow? Then again every older person figured that their time was harder than the time the future generation was coming up in. Naruto had just been sitting there for the last several moments, just taking in what he had been told. It had been so long that his cigarette in his mouth had burned down almost all the way to his lips without him ever even taking a decent puff. Ever the helpful sensei, Asuma yanked the shortening stick out of Naruto's mouth before his lack of attention ended up giving him the lovely taste of ash on his tongue. That seemed to be enough to snap the young blonde out of his own thoughts that continued to pile on one after another. Naruto jumped up from where he had been sitting on the ground and swung a kick at the sturdy tree that held up with not even a quiver. Asuma raised an eyebrow at the sporadic behavior. Fine. Give me all the B rank, A rank, S rank dash. Hell, I'll take a fucking Z rank mission and I'll still come back, not a scratch on me. Naruto shouted with supreme authority and confidence, and I dare those useless Akatsuki guys to try and take the Kyuubi out of me. He tightened his grip and popped the water balloon in his hand purely by squeezing it, getting him to blanch in embarrassment. Oops. Instead of finding Naruto's behavior curious, by now Asuma was more than accustomed to his eccentric method of choosing to address his problems and concerns and merely grinned, extending his hand in the process. When you get back, I want to fight you. The stunned look on Naruto's face was just what he had been going for when he said that. You want to fight me? Naruto asked in a bit of amazement. Asuma nodded and followed up on his statement. I've never been able to say that I've wanted to fight anyone. Almost a year ago you were as soft as a wad of cookie dough. Well, now you proved you can be a Chunin, and in a few years I'll bet you, Shikamaru, and Ino will be as tough as diamonds. So when you and lazy ass come back, I want to fight you. All of you. For old time's sake. Since Team 10 wasn't his team anymore, he couldn't give them routine ass kickings. He kind of missed it. However, on the other hand, Naruto seemed quite inspired by hearing that Asuma wished to eventually fight him and test his skills after he returned. And he'd be ready for that, for Akatsuki, and for anything else that his life as a ninja seemed suitable to throw at him next. And he didn't think twice as he eagerly extended his own hand to Asuma's in a thorough and hearty shake. The next morning, the streets of the village were quiet and empty as it was still extremely dark outside. The only real sounds over the fading sounds of the nighttime insects that could be heard were a pair of shuffling footsteps on the road towards one of Konoha's gates. It's too early for this crap. I'd have a clone carry me, but my clone would just complain and it would just end up being a waste of chakra. It's so troublesome. Shika, are you going to bitch all the way to the capital? No, never mind, that's not the question. Are you going to bitch for the next 3 years? Yes. Yes, I am. Someone has to, and since Ino's not coming, I guess I'm the one that'll do it. You bitch more than Ino-chan ever did anyway. Their stride was stopped by a rather loud clearing of one's throat, attracting Naruto and Shikamaru's attention to a tree sitting behind a picket fence with Ino sitting in the branches and leaning against the tree trunk as she looked down at them both, glaring at Shikamaru. Shika, did you just call me a bitch? Instead of saying yes or no, Shikamaru froze in place much like a deer with a light shone on it until he came up with an appropriate response. You see, the fact that I had to hesitate to think of an answer that wouldn't make you want to jump down here and give me a goodbye beating should answer the question right there. Contrary to what would be expected of Ino, she did not jump down and begin assaulting Shikamaru for more or less admitting to her face that he called her a bitch. She simply kept an even-looking expression on her face and made a sucking noise with her teeth. I'm just going to save that. And I'll get you when you come back. She stood up and jumped down from her place in the tree to give Shikamaru a hug. I'll miss you, you jerk. Shiho would have come to say goodbye too, but with her shifts she barely gets enough sleep as it is. It was a hug that Shikamaru easily returned. Even if he found her troublesome more often than he would have liked to, she was still one of his closest friends. Yeah. She's a nice girl. Way less trouble than you. Tell her I said I'll see her around. Just don't cry on me, alright? Ino pulled away and thumped him on the shoulder with a smirk on her face. You think I'll cry over you leaving? Ha, don't flatter yourself, Shika. But if you go and get yourself killed to make me cry, I'll never forgive you. Rolling his eyes, Shikamaru couldn't help but smile a little bit. I won't. Even if I died, you'd probably still find a way to gripe at me beyond the grave. With that being said, Ino turned to Naruto and extended her hand expectantly, getting him to raise his eyebrow in confusion until she spoke up. Your apartment. Come on, who else is going to watch it and keep it looking halfway decent until you stumble back into town? Oh. Yeah, sure. Naruto said, reaching into his pocket and dropping his key into her hand. In response, Ino gave him a beaming smile and a hug as well that he happily received. If he wasn't going to see her for a long time, he was going to make it count. She was the girl or woman that was the closest to him in his life by an extremely considerable margin. And much like him, Ino did as well with her arms wrapped around Naruto's neck to keep him close in the embrace. The same goes for you too, hero. Don't go and do something stupid like die on me. I'm sure you're smart enough to know how I'd take that one. She said quietly from her proximity to his ear with a sly smile on her face, I want you back here soon. Yeah, I know you'd take it badly. Naruto said, taking his time and rubbing her back gently, me and Shika are your friends, of course you would. We'll be back for sure. I promise. Sigh swing and a miss. Ino thought to herself. Maybe he still wasn't sharp enough to figure what she was talking about with her last statement. Oh, well at least he was cute. And he had 3 years to get the picture. She'd have to make sure she developed into a knockout to take him off of his feet so that he couldn't miss her signals no matter how subtle she tried to be about it. You'd better, you gold-tinted bastard. Oi. Naruto said, feigning offense at Ino's comment, I'm half of a bastard. I know who my mother is, thank you very much. He really didn't want to let go though. He could have stood there holding on to Ino until the sun came up if he were to be honest about it, and he was pretty sure she wouldn't have minded in the least either. Ino was just like that. He liked it. Much to Naruto's disappointment, he eventually had to end the hug once Shikamaru played moment killer and spoke up, hey. If this is going to keep going on, I'll just go home and go back to bed. Come get me and wake me up when you two get enough of each other. Both of the blondes could have punched Shikamaru for that reason, and he realized it when they let go of each other to shoot a glare at him. He had to take a few steps back to make sure they didn't attack him. Ugh, Kami help him if those two actually got through the brick wall of both Ino's own desire to get boys to fall for her as opposed to the alternative, Naruto's own density when it came to other people's more discreet feelings towards him, and they got together. He was not going to be the uncle to perhaps the most troublesome child ever conceived. Taking the most stressful personality traits in the village thrown together to make one single, solitary child? Oh goodness. No way in hell was there going to be any Shikamaru Aji to Naruto and Ino's offspring. Fine. Naruto growled out, jerking his head towards the path that led out of town, we should get going anyway, it should take a day or two to get there. He said, shifting his backpack on his back and stomping off down the road. Shikamaru rubbed the back of his neck, knowing that this was going to come back to bite him in the ass sooner rather than later. It was a long trip to the daimyo's court and Naruto didn't need much time to formulate a scheme for horrific revenge pranking. No amount of strategic planning could keep him safe 24/7. As the two of them walked away, Ino just waved goodbye and stood there until they were out of sight. Once they were gone, her gaze softened fondly and she kicked at the dirt on the ground before turning towards the tree behind the picket fence she had made herself known from. Why didn't you come out and say anything? He would have loved to say goodbye to you even if you didn't say a word. You didn't even have to say that you liked him. No answer. Ino's eye twitched and she jumped up onto the fence to look down at the base of the tree, hopping down to the ground to speak to the pale-eyed person that had been leaning with her back against the tree just as long as she had been there. You came all the way out here so early in the morning to not say goodbye to him? Come on, Hinata. At first Hinata didn't say anything, just choosing to remain leaning against the tree, inwardly cursing the fact that she couldn't get over how embarrassing it would be to try and deliver some kind of significant goodbye to Naruto's face the way she had played out repeatedly in her own head. Ino didn't have any trouble doing so at all. That was just the kind of confidence that she had. You won't win. Hinata's naturally quiet voice was heard as clear as day in the quiet of the still dark Konoha early morning. Ino's eyes widened at the declaration, but then again she had expected as much from someone that had a long-standing crush on Naruto. When he comes back, when Naruto-kun returns, I'll be strong enough to tell him how I feel. I'll be the kind of person that can get him to look my way and walk with him. He isn't going to be yours. It was very surprising to hear the conviction in Hinata's voice. And damn it, she could relate because even though they were on the same team, Ino often felt like she was always a step or two behind. Hinata had never spoken that way before, but with the way that Ino almost put herself forward while bidding the Maverick Jinchuriki farewell, it probably grated on the Hyuga clan Kunoichi in a major way. She had not been going for that at all. That was admittedly her mistake. But still. Well, you'd better get some self-confidence by the time he does. Ino responded, hands on her hips with a tough look on her face, because the only way anyone's getting through to that thick-headed lug is by being as direct as you can possibly stomach. And I'll tell you a little secret. She then leaned forward towards Hinata closer as the girl did the same and narrowed her eyes at the escalating challenge before whispering next, "He already belongs to me. So try and take him if you want, I want to earn him the right way anyway." Hinata didn't say anything outside of a small noise as the two stared each other down intensely before choosing to go their own separate ways home. A few hours after this encounter, the sun would hit Ino's face and officially wake her up. At that point she would curse loudly in the middle of opening the door of her clan's flower shop to customers for the day. This prompted Inoichi to rush into the storefront from the back of the storage room and ask her what was wrong. The answer was simple, of course. She had inadvertently created another rival out of a friend for a boy all over again. Damn it. Omaka, Training Day 8. 2 months ago, Naruto's apartment. While not really the most suitable place for a meeting of this size, Naruto's apartment was still the only place that was secure enough for what was proposed to go on when it came to the events of this particular day. The male representatives of the former Genin squads of Team Kakashi, Team Asuma, Team Kurenai, and Team Guy were in attendance for this particular happening. Even Sasuke, who while not pleased to be there still made it a point to show up regardless. After finding out the necessary reason for his requested presence, however, he deemed the entire endeavor to be stupid and a total waste of time as far as he was concerned. "Are you serious?" Sasuke said, arms crossed over his chest as he stood against a wall, far away from where all of the other 7 young men were sitting on the floor in a traditional negotiation setup. "You called me here for this? I could be doing something useful right now instead of this dumbass crap. Just sit down already." Naruto exclaimed, sick of Sasuke's attitude. If this was how he was going to treat the entire thing, the faster you get with the program and help us finish, the faster you can go home and do whatever you were doing when my clone came to get you. Even Neji was playing ball, so to speak, so what was Sasuke's problem? A scowl crossed the young raven-haired Uchiha Chunin's face at the suggestion. "This is so stupid. It serves a purpose to all of us, Uchiha-san," Neji said coolly, seemingly the main negotiator of the terms before them all due to his level-headed attitude and arbitration skills. Getting back to business, he cleared his throat and returned attention to the list of things in front of them all. "Now, due to the fact that we all seem to interact more personally than we do with most other shinobi in the village, it has been established that a code of mutually agreed upon terms would be best for future dealings." A unanimous nod came from Shikamaru, Shino, Choji, but only a blank look came from Naruto, Lee, and Kiba. Shino let out a sigh and decided to simplify things. "What Neji-san is saying is that this is being done to keep things civil between us and establish a stronger bond." "I knew that," Naruto spouted with some red lining his cheeks. "I didn't want those two to feel dumb though," he finished, taking a swat on the back of the head from Kiba at the insult, getting the two to almost come to blows were it not for their respective teammates physically holding the two hotheads apart. Once civility reigned once more over the imposed meeting, main speaker Neji proceeded to give them all the rundown of the terms established between the lot of them thus far. "We will now go over a few of the more disputed terms of the pact." Receiving the papers from Neji, Shino read first. Number 1, clan jokes and comments will be kept to a wide generalization. They will not be personally aimed at any one person of a clan or family in particular not a part of this agreement. No innocence. An example would be, no commenting on the physically attractive traits of another's mother, sister, etc. This includes running past one's clan property and asking a member of the agreement's sister if she is ready to go on that date next week. Even as a joke. Kiba glared heatedly at sheepishly grinning Naruto as this point was made. Comments on the general traits of a clan will be kept good-natured taunts at worst unless there is ample provocation for more tepid remarks. Finding something else about that topic to speak on, Kiba raised his hand. "Does your team sensei count?" "No." Everyone said unanimously as Akamaru barked in kind. The Jonin that had taught them were still fair game for personal taunts and other comments, as were the rest of them directly. "Just wonderin'." The papers were passed on to Shikamaru, who began to read next. "In the case of a fight between two kunoichi of separate teams, a scale will be used to determine the need for intervention between those that are a part of this agreement. In the instance of small weapons being drawn, we must move closer and be prepared to intervene. In the instance of actual ninjutsu with potentially lethal consequences, intervention must be immediate with each male teammate on any given team responsible for restraining their respective kunoichi teammate. Anything less than these stipulations and the scuffle will be allowed to go on uninterrupted to de-escalate naturally. Both Naruto and Kiba exchanged a heartily agreed upon handshake in regards to this rule, more enthusiastic towards it than any other of those present who had agreed to the rule for their own reasons. Shikamaru handed the papers back to Neji, who quickly began to read the next thing out that held great importance to him and no one else really. In the instance of future combat against one of the members that possess a Jujutsu Kekai Genkai, Shakura Hankyuti to no Jutsu, Chakra Echolocation Jutsu, is outlawed. He rattled off seamlessly before passing the page to Shino quickly while Naruto wasn't paying attention, still all jazzed up with Kiba over the catfight law. Sasuke nodded unnoticeably in silent agreement to the decree, or for whatever reason he chose to do so. Despite this though, he still didn't join the assembly directly. "Let's wrap this up already," complained Shikamaru. They'd been sitting there writing that thing out and arguing for hours to get what they wanted on the form. How Neji managed to slip in the little addendum about Naruto's sonar jutsu he didn't know, but that wasn't really important to him. "My head hurts from putting this troublesome thing together. We all know what's on it, so let's just sign it and get on with it." He was not going to sit there while they went through 50+ rules that ranged from astute and fully reasonable to asinine vanity requests. Either way, they were more like guidelines instead of actual rules, like Konoha's list of shinobi rules. Nobody followed those things all the way through, they picked and chose what they liked out of it. Agreeing with his oldest friend, Choji nodded just in time with his stomach growling, "Yeah, let's get out of here and get something to eat already. I'm hungry and Naruto's cup ramen sucks." In Choji's opinion, he definitely needed more refreshments in his house. Naruto of course took immediate offense to this, especially since 12 empty containers of his sucky cup ramen sat around Choji on the floor. "You weren't saying that when you were sucking all of my food down like air, were you, UF-?" Naruto's mouth was swiftly covered before he could get out the rest of the potentially harmful, emotionally for Choji, physically for him, comment on the boy's weight. "Just sign the damn contract and get out of my house," Naruto said in a muffled voice from behind restrictive hands. Not needing to be asked again, all of them took out a pen and started signing their signatures one after another. When it was finally his turn to do so, Shino skimmed through the pages of the contract before raising an eyebrow at one of the addendums which he brought to the attention of those it mattered to. Looking at Naruto, Kiba, and Lee, who had already signed the agreement, he spoke, "I have to wonder if you three all read this particular part. It says dash dot." Lee cut Shino off with flames in his eyes, a youthful pact between comrades. Everyone should be aware of such a magnificent showing of unity between fellow Konoha ninja. "I will not rest until I have memorized each one of these laws. I will do so by the end of the day, or I will do 500 one-handed push-ups. Where is Gai-sensei? He needs to know of this." As the green-clad taijutsu specialist sprinted out of Naruto's house, almost ripping the front door from its bolts in the process, everyone just stared after him until Neji broke the unilateral silence. Lee just broke one of the rules. "I'll rebuke him later." Lee would also be doing 500 push-ups, because he didn't even wait for copies of the rules to be made before leaving. With a nod, Shino was about to read the rule in question as he adjusted his sunglasses like reading glasses. "What does this rule state?" "I'll tell you. It says dash dot." "Shino," Naruto said in a deadpan voice, cutting him off, "I don't care. What are the chances that I'm actually going to break anything on this list?" A fine showing that he hadn't been paying much attention to any of the rules other than the ones that were cool to him or that he had a direct hand in making. "I'll read it later." "Naruto-san, you already signed it." "I'll read it later." The two engaged in something of a stare-off before Shino signed the papers, never breaking eye contact from the blonde, at least as far as Naruto could tell. If his head didn't move, Naruto couldn't tell he was looking down from behind his sunglasses. At this point, Sasuke's curiosity won out and he made his way over, subtly activating his Sharingan to scan over the contract and its rules, where he noticed what Shino had been referring to when it came to the what some of the others didn't read and what Rock Lee had violated within seconds of signing his consent to the rules. When indoors, indoor voices must be used. Yelling is legally allowed to be reprimanded with a strike to the head and the recipient is not allowed to retaliate. Also, when outdoors, if your voice can be heard further away than half a mile and someone isn't about to die or you are not in horrendous pain, the same punishment applies. Immediately, without being prompted, Sasuke picked up a pen and signed his own name before walking out of Naruto's apartment with his hands in his pockets. That was his kind of rule. That's it for part 19. Thank you for watching and see you on the next video.